conference will now be recorded.
Good evening and welcome to the October 15th, 2025 South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners meeting. I will call this meeting to order. We have all commissioners present this evening. At this time, I would ask you to all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to announce that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted to the Township website for public access. At this time, I will ask our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci, to please review our public virtual meeting rules.
Thank you. The public virtual meeting rules are as follows. Courtesy of the floor for non-agenda items will be at the beginning and end of the agenda. Public comment will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. For all listed agenda items, the board president will call for courtesy of the floor prior to the Board of Commissioners taking action on that specific agenda item. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed. You will be asked to state your name and address for the record and may then proceed with asking your question. For those participating virtually, please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid any background noise that may cause interference during the meeting. The chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address into the chat box. The staff member monitoring GoToMeeting will then unmute your microphone, and you will have the opportunity to comment or ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd also like to announce the Board of Commissioners met in executive session prior to tonight's meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. Agenda item 4 is courtesy of the floor. This is opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on a non-agenda items. I realize we've got a PERT ordinance hearing on the agenda this evening. If you're here to comment on that, I will call for public comment when that agenda item is reached. At this point, it is public comment for non-agenda items. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board this evening? Is there anyone online with a non-agenda comment for the board? Seeing and hearing none, agenda item 5 is presentations. 5A, we have the open space referendum update. I will ask our long-range planner, Chris Stroller, to please present.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I just wanted to give a brief update. I know we've talked about the Township's open space referendum several times over the past several months. Just as a reminder, on Tuesday, November 4th of this year, Election Day, at the municipal election, the voters of South Whitehall will see a question asking if they favor the increase of an earned income tax by 0.1%, making the existing 1% earned income tax be 1.1%, with that 0.1% being used to support an open space preservation program. The actual question is listed on the page here of what the voters will see in the booth. And then attached to that, there will be what is referred to as a plain English statement, which gives a little bit more detail as to what that funding can be used for and what exactly is being asked. So the ballot question asks whether the voters would support the increase of 0.1% on an annual basis to be used for essentially three items. One, purchasing a property, purchasing open space properties, or purchasing easements on open space properties to preserve water quality, farms, agricultural resources, historic buildings and sites, and other important natural resources. So the funding used from that program would be specifically to purchase property or easements. Additionally, the funding from that could be used to, if the township were to pursue alternative sources of financing, whether it be a municipal bond in order to purchase larger properties, more than the township has available in that fund. Some of the funding from the earned income tax increase could be used to pay off the debt of that bond. Again, only a bond for the purchase of open space. And up to 25% of the accumulated funds from that open space fund could be used for the maintenance and improvement and management of open space properties within the township. So again, this question is being asked of the voters on Tuesday, November 4th of this year. And if this receives a majority in favor of the voters to say yes to this, it allows the township to pass an ordinance next year to increase that earned income tax by 0.1%.
Very good, Chris. Thank you for reviewing that agenda item for the board and for the public. I do encourage members of the public to visit the township website. On the homepage, there is a section of that website designated to explain this in more detail. Lots of information there. Please take a moment to educate yourself before you go to the voting booth. Thank you again to staff.
If I can just add, I think we have some flyers out in the lobby as well. If anyone's interested, on the table out there, there's a lot of background information on the referendum.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5B, under presentations, we have an announcement of the Massite Mid-Atlantic Section Institute of Transportation Engineers Award recognition. And Chris, if you'd present as well.
Thank you. So earlier this year in April, the township adopted what we call phase 1 of the township's transportation plan. This plan we developed with staff, a steering committee, and the consulting team at Bowman Consulting. We actually have Rob Gates from Bowman here with us tonight. Many of you, all of you participated in one way or another with this plan, many of the community members as well. This took place again over probably the 2023-2024 period. And the main components of the transportation plan, this first phase, addressed public engagement, working with the community and some of our key stakeholders, PennDOT, the school district, our emergency management personnel, to identify transportation needs in the township, specifically around the subjects of active transportation, which includes walking, biking, rolling, accessibility, and using transit, and around safety, identifying what were some of the highest priority safety needs on our transportation network, identifying critical locations for safety improvements, and identifying what are our key safety corridors to address. We are very happy that this plan was adopted this year, and we've already been moving forward significantly on trying to implement this plan. A couple of the key tasks we've started to move forward are, first, the formation of a Vision Zero task force. I mentioned the steering committee that was involved in developing this plan. It was a great group of both internal stakeholders, including township staff and different departments and folks that interact with the township, but we had a lot of external partners as well, including health networks, nonprofits, those that represent our most vulnerable communities. And we wanted to continue to try to build off of that momentum of having this diverse group focused on transportation safety and moving transportation projects forward. So this Vision Zero task force is, I'd say, more of an ad hoc committee of the township's existing public safety commission, who meets monthly in this room. Part of what the task force is challenged with is to implement the goals and the vision of this plan, track the metrics of the projects that are moving forward, have discussions on what projects should be brought to both the Public Safety Commission and to this board for approval, whether that's capital improvements on township roadways or new programs in cooperation with, say, the police department or with the school district. And to continue to encourage that collaboration, both internally and externally. One of the priority projects that we've identified, probably the most prominent corridor in our plan, was Hamilton Boulevard, particularly in front of the Dorney Park area. As a top safety corridor identified, we have been working on what we call a road safety audit, which is a very detailed analysis of what the particular safety issues of that corridor are. And again, working with that kind of diverse viewpoints, we're working with Dorney Park, PennDOT, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, and Lanta on getting all of their feedback to address the safety concerns that they see, and also to develop consensus on opportunities that we see to address this corridor. We're very excited about that moving forward, and we hope to have that project, at least the plan for that, finished up by the end of the year. From both a safety perspective and from an active transportation perspective, the Whitehall Avenue corridor was identified as a key north-south route for connecting our bicycles, pedestrians, and so forth because of its access underneath Route 22. It also connects to one of the 3 catalytic projects over at Kratzer Elementary in identifying corridor connections and intersection connections near the elementary school to make it easier for safe routes to school and access to the school. So we're working with, again, Rob and his team at Bowman on a corridor study here. It's important. This also came from the community on Whitehall Avenue as a traffic calming request. So we're including the identification of not just these active transportation connection pieces, but also the facilities to address traffic calming. And we're excited to see that move forward. So just to give you an idea, these are all things that we've already started to implement. We felt like this was a unique approach to the plan, so we are excited that the May site, which is the Mid-Atlantic section of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, recognized the importance of planning in this way and moving forward on your plan so they don't sit on a shelf. And they identified this as their project of the year that applies innovative methods and techniques to solve transportation problems and issues for the overall betterment of the community. Rob and Bowman are members of the 600 active members of the transportation engineers, planners, educators, and students across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and West Virginia that are part of this organization. And we're very pleased to have worked with them on a great plan and are excited to continue implementing that plan. And we are pleased that the efforts of the township have been recognized for this. So I don't know if Rob wanted to just say anything, but we recognize his involvement in all of this, seeing this happen.
Good evening, Rob. Could you just turn the microphone on? The green light should come on.
Great.
Excellent.
Yeah, I just want to take a second to say how much I appreciate having me here tonight, and it was really a pleasure to work on this project. Like Chris mentioned, it was kind of an innovative approach where we've done a lot of these projects throughout the state and surrounding areas where we often do like active transportation on its own or safety on its own, but really merging the two together and recognizing that they go hand in hand and are really essential to plan those together was really a novel approach, and was really excited to have that recognized by this organization. So I think it reflects really well on the initiative and just the direction of the township and moving forward with the plan, especially like Chris mentioned with the already keeping momentum going with those initiatives. And like I said, not wanting it to be a plan that just sits on the shelf, but actually be implementable and move forward and make the township safer for all types of transportation. So we're excited to see where it goes from here, and we're really happy to be a part of it. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob, and the entire team at Bowman and our staff for all the work, the advisory committees that were part of this. It's fantastic. This is going to have a lasting impact on our community, and congratulations to all of you on a very successful plan. It's fantastic. Thank you. You want to take?
I think we're going to take a quick picture. I think Rob has the award here.
Moving on to agenda item 6, meeting minutes from the October 1st, 2025 Board of Commissioners meeting were distributed in advance to the board. Are there any comments or questions? If not, I need a motion to approve. So moved. Second. Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Agenda item 7A under ordinances, public hearing. We have an ordinance of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, amending Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 350 zoning of the codified ordinances to add data center as a new use to section 350-48D2, add section 350-33 to create a planned innovation, research and technology PERT overlay district and establishing regulations for the PERT district. Add attachment 4, appendix D, PERT design guidelines. Amend the zoning map to identify the boundary of the PERT overlay district and provide a repealer. Failure to enforce, not a waiver, severability, and effective date. And I'm going to turn this portion of the meeting over to our solicitor, Attorney Joe Zader.
Thank you, President Kelly. I will now officially declare the public hearing open for this proposed ordinance. Under the law in Pennsylvania, there are two purposes behind a public hearing such as this. One is to inform the public about the ordinance, and the second is to receive public comment. The protocol we're going to be using this evening for this public hearing, after I conclude with my presentation, staff will have an opportunity to present the ordinance in detail and explain it for everyone's understanding. There'll be an opportunity then for the Board of Commissioners to render comments and to ask questions. And then, as President Kelly had mentioned earlier in the proceeding, there'll be an opportunity for public comment. So the next part that I'm going to address are the legal requirements that led us to this public hearing. This ordinance that's proposed this evening has been prepared by Township staff. There is a legal requirement under the law for certain public notices to be given. Those have been accomplished. The public notice itself contains the date, time, and location of this public hearing. And it also mentions that there's a possibility the board would consider voting to adopt or not to adopt the ordinance this evening. That public notice also includes a brief description of what the ordinance contents are, and President Commissioner Kelly just read that a moment ago. And it also should be noted that the proposed ordinance has been available online at the South Whitehall Township website, and full text has been made available at the township as required by law. The required advertising that has been pursued for this evening, there have been certified mail notices to property owners whose property zoning is being modified. There's been advertising in accordance with the legal requirements in the Parkland Press and the Lehigh Valley Press, and that's included the ordinance itself for the public hearing and the possibility of consideration for adoption. A copy of the ordinance has been provided to the Lehigh Valley Press, the Parkland Press. The subject property has been posted with the public notice. An attested copy of the ordinance that's proposed has been provided to the County Department of Law. And given the extensive nature of the ordinance and recognizing that the public would have an interest in it, and that's evident by the attendance we have here this evening, the township undertook extraordinary measures to inform the public beyond the bare minimum legal requirements, and township staff will talk about those in a few minutes. If anyone would want to see the proof of the various publication and the notice requirements haven't been fulfilled, they are on file at the township. Another requirement legally for a hearing like this and for consideration for adoption is that the proposed ordinance be provided to the Township Planning Commission for review and consideration. That has occurred, and at the September 11 meeting of the Township Planning Commission, it was a unanimous vote recommending adoption, and there were no suggested modifications. Another legal requirement is that the proposed ordinance be provided to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, and that did occur as required by law as well. And the LVPC, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, did provide a letter on August 29, having reviewed the proposed ordinance, and the LVPC letter was a very favorable recommendation. And in light of the purpose of tonight's meeting, there are just a few brief excerpts that I'll read for the public. This is authored by the LVPC. The ordinance amendment demonstrates several best practices in innovative planning and aligns with the future Lehigh Valley, the regional plan. Using an overlay district is a strategic move to direct potential energy consumptive uses to areas that can accommodate them. And then finally, the planned innovation, research, and technology, PERT District design guidelines demonstrate adaptability of local governments and provides best land use practices. The proposed pedestrian zone is a valued addition that assists in connecting regional trails to centers and corridors and encourages use of universal design. The proposed facade standards play a vital role in enhancing the visual appeal and environmental sustainability of PERT district developments. Through the integration of sustainable materials and design, industrial facades also contribute to environmental goals, reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. As I mentioned, this public hearing may conclude, if the board so wishes, to result in a vote on this ordinance, and that has been advertised as required by law. And that advertising information, again, is available in the township file should anybody ever wish to see that. Okay, that having been said, that'll conclude what I have to say at the moment, and I'll now turn it over to the township manager to begin the staff presentation.
Thank you, Attorney Zader. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. We are here tonight to discuss the proposed Planned Innovation, Research, and Technology District, or PERT, ordinance. This ordinance is the culmination of planning, citizen engagement, and careful consideration about how South Whitehall Township should grow while protecting the community and sense of place that residents strongly value. In convening this public meeting, the township posted information on the township website, included information within the e-newsletter, published a public notice in the Parkland Press, and sent out postcards to properties located within a 1,000-foot buffer around the properties that are within the extent of the boundaries of the PERT ordinance. Viewed collectively, all of these actions are in excess of the legal requirements for public notice concerning both this public hearing and the consideration of the adoption of the ordinance. Back in 2023, the township adopted a new comprehensive plan that set a vision for the next 10 years. That plan focused on protecting open space, guiding where growth should occur, and making sure development fits within the existing character of South Whitehall. A year later, the township adopted the South Whitehall Landscapes Plan, which gave us more specific tools to preserve the unique environmental, cultural, and historical resources of the Jordan Valley. Everyone needs to keep in mind that in crafting township plans and drafting township ordinances to guide future land use, Pennsylvania law requires that South Whitehall Township must provide for every conceivable use within its boundaries. It is not lawful to exclude any land uses. So given that legal obligation, township engagement with the community was a high priority for the township. Township officials and staff met with landowners, developers, and community stakeholders to better understand what types of uses were being considered and what challenges or opportunities they presented. These conversations included discussions about traditional industrial uses, potential residential and mixed-use projects, and more recently, the growing interest in data centers. These meetings helped us to see both the development pressures in the township and the need for clearer, more consistent, and contemporary zoning rules. These conversations with landowners and developers were necessary to understand what types of projects were actually being considered, whether industrial, residential, or mixed use, and what challenges or opportunities they might bring. Without that direct dialogue, we would have been drafting zoning rules in the abstract instead of grounding them in the real development pressures facing South Whitehall. Those discussions helped us to see not just where growth might happen, but what tools would be needed to manage it responsibly. So as we worked with landowners, developers, and residents on these projects, we first explored a zoning overlay for the Jordan Valley that include a planned industrial area. This was meant to allow certain industrial uses while requiring strong buffers, open space, and trails. But as discussions continued, we realized that combining residential, commercial, and industrial concepts into one overlay was too complex. At the same time, interest in data centers, which are large-scale industrial facilities that store and process digital information, began growing quickly across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in the Lehigh Valley, and here in South Whitehall. So this included direct meetings with developers and landowners within the Jordan Valley itself to discuss the growing interest in data centers and what such projects could mean specifically for South Whitehall residents and the community. Recognizing that a fact of the large portion of the Jordan Valley is already zoned for industrial uses. To address this, we shifted gears and created the PERT district ordinance as a standalone ordinance. The goal is simple: to encourage modern, lighter industrial and technology uses, such as research facilities, advanced manufacturing, and data centers, while putting in place clear rules to protect the community for those uses. So until now, data centers were not directly addressed in the township's existing zoning ordinance. Developers could only request them through the special exception use process outlined in the zoning ordinance, which relied on broad conditions and left many questions potentially unanswered. The PERT ordinance assuages those concerns. Provided the landowners opt into the PERT provisions, it sets specific standards for where data centers can go, what they must look like, and imposes conditions on potential impacts such as noise, and also how the data centers must be designed to minimize overall community impacts. So that includes requirements for extensive landscape buffers, pedestrian connections, protections for nearby neighborhoods, among other things. This ordinance recognizes the statewide push for data centers and innovative industries, but it also ensures that South Whitehall grows on its own terms. In crafting the PERT district, we're trying and attempting to take a proactive approach. It attempts to encourage innovation investment while doing so with clear expectations that safeguard residents, the infrastructure, and the environment. In short, the PERT ordinance positions South Whitehall to be ready for the present and the future while holding firm to the values that define the community. So tonight is your opportunity to learn more about the ordinance, ask questions, and share your thoughts before the board considers adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for that background. And thank you, Attorney Zader, for opening up the public hearing. Just to reiterate for the benefit of the public, tonight we are presenting a zoning ordinance amendment that includes an optional zoning overlay. This is not a land development review. This is not a land development proposal. This is an amendment to the existing township zoning ordinance that would allow the PERT district to be included in the township zoning ordinance. Additionally, as part of that amendment, we are addressing necessary changes to effectuate that amendment to allow a new optional zoning overlay. Specifically, we are including clear definitions for data centers. Data centers, as Tom mentioned, are not currently defined in the township zoning ordinance. This amendment defines them, provides criteria for them, includes them in the optional PERT overlay district. You will also see in the presentation, it also includes data centers under a conditional use process. We'll go over the differences of what those are in the presentation. So I wanted to give a little bit more of a background to how we arrived at this point of starting to develop an overlay district for the Jordan Valley. I also wanted to give a little bit of background on some of these specifics within the ordinance itself.
And just to introduce, this is Chris Stroller, Long Range Planner. He will be handling the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
There we go. So as Tom mentioned, in 2023, the township adopted the comprehensive plan. This went through an extensive public engagement process. By law, this establishes a vision for the community over the next 10 to 15 years, particularly around the future land use plan. From a land use planning perspective, this is a high-level view of how the township can be shaped, preserved, developed in the future. We utilize this for all of the work that we do in establishing new codes, ordinances, and more regulatory documents. What you see here is an example, or this is direct, actually, this is the future land use plan from the township's comprehensive plan. As we have gone through the comprehensive plan, we have taken all the elements dealing with community facilities, utilities, open space preservation, transportation, and housing needs to combine those goals and look at a land use plan that accommodates all of those goals. What we have are 5 categories of future land use. You can also see in the hatch here, excuse me, where we identified the presence of natural resources. These land use categories each have their own specific goal, and then we use those to inform future zoning updates, future goals for preservation, or future goals for development. This green land use type in the northern part of the township is what we identified as our Jordan Valley land use. We identified very specific goals for the Jordan Valley, and highlighted the uniqueness of the natural and historic and agricultural resources there. Because land use is such a broad, has such a broad guiding tone, and when we start to look at zoning updates, which can be very particular, we wanted to add an intermediary step into how we can actually guide some of the changes that we would potentially make. By doing this, we used what we call place types, which are introduced to help us take those broad land use goals and within those land use areas, identify what kind of places we would like to see in the township. The place types here, you can see are what we've identified as the types of places we would like to see in South Whitehall. We've used that to identify where those places should be within those land use categories and use that to inform our zoning. One of those place types that we identified is called conservation subdivision. The concept here is to cluster development on a smaller footprint that allows for more open space to be preserved around that footprint. This became a critical type of preservation tool, particularly in the Jordan Valley, for us to consider what we might have already as what we call large lot residential zoning, where we might require a minimum of, say, 2 or 3 acres for one property, but to utilize this conservation subdivision to focus some of that development to have the same number of housing units, but on a smaller footprint, encouraging and requiring the preservation around that. Mm-hmm. This avoids, as you can see somewhat in the image here, the idea of cutting up an entire farm field or getting closer to a sensitive stream corridor, or by removing trees just to accommodate the allowed zoning that can, the allowed number of residential units that can be here. Again, that land use category of the Jordan Valley became of particular interest to the township staff to identify very unique goals and preservation opportunities. You can see here on the left the place types that we use to identify what we would want to see in the Jordan Valley, including open space, agriculture, rural settings, and again, that conservation subdivision concept. Excuse me. The specific goal of the Jordan Valley is to preserve the rural and historic character through the following mechanisms. By preserving natural resources and important landscapes through incentives and cooperation with landowners. If you participated in the township's open space plan efforts, South Whitehall Landscapes, we talked a lot about property rights and different tools of working with private landowners to protect property. Another mechanism is to enhance crossroad villages with attention to the surrounding landscape. We have existing mixed use areas and commercial areas, and to utilize those historic villages to protect some of those resources around it. Encourage the continuation of active agriculture by making the laws easier to support the idea of working farms. And to, again, incentivize the utilization of that conservation subdivision for future land developments. Additionally, in the Jordan Valley area, if you can see some of the gaps where we did not identify the Jordan Valley, we identified an industrial land use category. This addressed the existing industrial zoning that we have in the township and industrial land use from previous comprehensive plans. Industrial land use also identifies conservation subdivision as one of those potential place types. The goals specifically for our industrial areas were to require buffers to be proportionate to the degree of impact and intensity of development. Also to consider transit and multimodal connections to support employees. And very importantly, to coordinate development along transportation routes that can appropriately accommodate traffic impacts. Essentially looking at if we have high intensity traffic generators, making sure that those are directed in areas that it can be accommodated appropriately. As Tom mentioned, and I mentioned previously, Immediately after the adoption of the comprehensive plan, the township embarked on what we call our South Whitehall Landscapes Plan, which looks at the preservation of historic resources, agricultural resources, and natural resources, all providing guidance into how we look at actually protecting open space and using open space as a way to preserve a lot of those resources. This plan identified specific goals for resource preservation. It helped define and classify open space, and it emphasized the need to create a new optional zoning overlay for that Jordan Valley area to utilize some of those new concepts, including conservation subdivision and some of our other preservation techniques to preserve the critical resources in that area. What you see here is a snippet from the South Whitehall Landscapes Plan. This is what we call our open space transect. These are the 9 classifications of open space that we identified in South Whitehall or that we would like to see in South Whitehall. This gives us very clear direction on when we discuss open space. We have a shared vocabulary of what that means for South Whitehall, and we can put rules and codes and give direction, whether it be to township staff as far as management of open space, to the public as far as what open space they can see and utilize or experience in the township, and for developments when we are looking at requiring open space. So as part of the goals of the South Whitehall Landscapes Plan and utilizing this open space transect, in September of last year, we began the process to look at an optional incentive-based zoning overlay. Again, going back to that, working cooperatively with landowners, understanding we cannot force them to do everything that we may want on their private property, but by working with them and establishing incentives, we can encourage a common goal. This optional zoning overlay particularly focused on that idea of conservation subdivision, along with other tools to encourage more open space required in the Jordan Valley area than under current zoning and under most other development processes. It also included required architectural and site design guidelines so that we could, again, try to identify and protect some of those values of complementary style developments, paying particular attention to some of the historic areas of the northern part of the township and preserving that rural character. What you can see here is this is a snippet of the township's existing zoning map. So in these areas, these RR3, RR2 areas, those are rural residential. Those are large lot residential areas. Again, a location that could benefit from that utilization of conservation subdivision. What you see here in blue is the township's existing industrial zone. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. The green outline is where we conceptually identified where this optional Jordan Valley overlay would go. Looking at a large area of the township allowed us to look at how all of the open space and the natural resources can work together and how we can look at identifying open space preservation on a landscape level rather than an individual site-by-site review. So that open space zoning overlay that we started last year initially identified 3 types of development that could be applied in that overlay. The first would be village residential, again, using that conservation subdivision technique by clustering residential homes centered around what we call civic open space or open space to be used by people, whether that be through passive garden or a small pocket park, and with a lot of attention given to viewshed preservation so that new developments blend more into the existing rural environment rather than be a stark difference. The second option is the Crossroad Village, which is the idea of mixing residential and what we call local serving commercial. Think of your historic villages such as Cootsville, Mechanicsville, where you have some commercial uses surrounded by residential uses. A lot of this was also to encourage the adaptive reuse of historic structures and allow for these historic type of developments to be more of an interest in the modern development era. The final piece of the final development type of this zoning overlay is what we called planned industrial. Again, we have a large industrial area that we need to accommodate within this potential overlay. The idea of planned industrial is to utilize conservation subdivision approach to industrial uses by clustering. Here are just some examples of visual examples of what we mean by these three development types with the village residential, again, clustering homes and so forth. Crossroad Village, or the village mixed use, is integrating some of that local serving commercial. Again, high attention to civic open space and surrounding conservation open space. We identified concepts for planned industrial by taking components out of the comprehensive plan and the land use plan, looking at how do we make sure that we are providing buffers proportionate to the impacts of the developments that could go there, and ensuring that we preserve as much open space and usable open space, whether it be for agriculture, whether it be for wildlife habitat, or in some cases, even though it's industrial, whether it be used for passive recreation. As part of this, we also identified the need to have better pedestrian circulation through some of our industrial uses, whether it be for the employees or to support some of our active transportation goals of the township. So to highlight where we've gone since last year, when we started this Jordan Valley zoning overlay, in January and February of this year, we put out some information to the public about what we've been developing. We spoke at Board of Commissioner meetings and Planning Commission meetings, and we've launched this project hub on the Township website that allowed for not just a better understanding for the public as to what the purpose of this Jordan Valley zoning overlay was, but a comment box as well to collect feedback and some frequently asked questions. In March and April of this year, as we were moving through the development of the drafting of this Jordan Valley overlay, we, again, we're trying to utilize those three development types of the mixed use, the village residential, and the planned industrial. Staff and the consultants we're working with identified very specific challenges either through the process of approving these types of developments or the incentives in this incentive-based zoning ordinance. We identified challenges in having the same ordinance for industrial projects and for residential mixed use. So in May and June of this year, we made the shift to remove planned industrial from the Jordan Valley zoning overlay and to switch it into its own standalone optional zoning overlay, which we are calling the Planned Innovation, Research, and Technology Park District Overlay. So again, to highlight the township's industrial district up in the northeast corner of the township, you can see a picture of some of the existing industrial use that's there. The industrial district is about 900 acres that is zoned heavy industrial in the northeast corner of the township. 2/3 of that district are currently undeveloped. The development that has occurred there has been the Trojan powder plant and some chemical manufacturing over the past several decades. This is the township zoning map from the first township zoning ordinance in 1961. At that time, when township first adopted its zoning ordinance, that entire area has been zoned industrial. Again, that historic use has been the manufacturing and storing of explosives and then chemical manufacturing. Now, there's currently nothing really in operation that day. The chemical plant closed a few years ago. You may see a lot of that area near Parkland High School, along Warfield Road and Mock Junk Road. It looks like farm field today. It is farm field today, but it has historically been zoned industrial. Just we have not received any projects that have moved forward on the development of industrial to date. As we developed the township's comprehensive plan and have gone through the zoning overlay, it was important to identify the need to make sure that our planned industrial uses and addressing that zone were something that bridge that gap of heavy industry, also with the sentiments that we heard from the community over the past 4 or almost 7 years since the beginning of the comp plan of preserving community character, forwarding the township into a good vision for the future, and especially around the idea of open space. So the PERT district, that is the subject of the conversation tonight, really has a few key goals, and that's to provide zoning regulations that fulfill those land use goals of the comprehensive plan. It also introduces modern technology-based uses that generate minimal traffic impacts. Traffic impacts in the northeast corner of the township were one of the things that we heard the most from the community as a concern, and our transportation planning also reflects that. Over the course of the past year, as many of you in the room and online, and certainly as staff, we have heard the idea of data centers has grown more and more prominent, especially in our area in the Lehigh Valley, and particularly in South Whitehall. By going through this planned industrial process, this is also an important, has also been an important pivot to address data centers as not only a use that fits within the industrial zone compared to other areas of the township, but to utilize the goals of the industrial land use from the comprehensive plan to address this new type of use that will be coming to the area. So within the PERT district itself, within the actual ordinance that is proposed for tonight, there are a number of things that we'll go through in a little bit of detail. The purpose of the PERT district is, again, that it's an optional zoning district. It is not required. It does not change anything in that area. We introduce new uses. There are required design guidelines. There's increased setbacks. There are different types of zones that we specify particular needs for. We have required facade dimensions and requirements for that, along with screening. This also addresses data centers very specifically. So again, just to reiterate, this is an optional zoning overlay. If you live in the industrial zone, there's a good chance that this does not affect you directly as far as your zoning, because what this is it really only addresses new developments, and we have requirements that these are developments over 2.5 acres. It is an option for the landowner or developer to opt into, and if they do so, they have to follow the requirements of the zoning ordinance. There are new uses permitted in this zone, new uses that are already in existence in the township zoning ordinance, but these uses that can now be permitted in this area are to encourage, again, that that lighter industrial use and to foster a sense of tech innovation. For example, research and development facilities, flex spaces, and the importance of encouraging STEM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. This allows a township to encourage that type of tech campus, and it also breathes new life into a historic industrial zone. This also could encourage partnerships with Parkland School District or L3C, or other post-secondary education facilities in the area. We mentioned the required design guidelines. There are examples, or the design guidelines are included in the packet and in the adoption. If a developer chooses to opt into the PERT district, they must follow the specific design and architectural requirements within these guidelines and codified in the ordinance itself. The benefit here is that this can help dictate site layout more than we potentially could in just a land development review. Again, helping to preserve some of that character of the area and to shield visual impacts from the community. We prepared the design guidelines by a registered architect and a certified planner. And the goal for this was to encourage an aesthetic that was appropriate for the PERT that also pays very particular attention to the unique area of the Jordan Valley. Just want to note that by having the design guidelines both in the ordinance, but also by having the graphical guidelines to accompany that, it removes any potential misinterpretations or misconceptions about what the design should be. It provides a common way for elected officials, staff, the public, and developers to all get on the same page as what we can see potential developments that would come in under the PERT look like. We talk about setbacks. These are setbacks to require buildings to be set back from the public road. Most buildings in the existing industrial zone have a required setback of 50 feet. Under the PERT district, every project that comes in must be at least 200 feet from existing public roads and from residential properties. This obviously allows a lot more buffering and less impact on some of those surrounding areas. It also preserves some of the view sheds and allows for more open space, in addition to anything that is required as far as specific open space preservation. We also require a pedestrian zone that takes a more appropriate approach to pedestrian circulation than just say sidewalks on a busy road. This includes trees between a 10-foot wide trail and to buffer the trail users from the roadway, and to include a split rail fence to identify where public property ends and private property begins. The idea here is that it not only provides better pedestrian circulation, but it also provides a good anchor point for view shed protection, especially from the roadway. The buffer zone is just beyond that pedestrian zone. We require a minimum 50-foot buffer zone in between industrial uses and non-industrial uses. So if you're looking at it from a roadway, you would have first the pedestrian zone and then this buffer zone and then the development. These buffer zones have significantly more requirements from a landscaping perspective and from a natural resource perspective than the existing township zoning ordinance. We also wanted to note that there is a lot of existing vegetation in the industrial area right now. So we want to make sure that we accommodate the idea of still using trees and mature woodlands as part of this buffer zone if approved by the Township Landscape and Shade Tree Commission. As part of new developments in the PERT district, we require specific facade requirements. This is to avoid monotonous box-looking buildings. We actually require some architectural design, and this helps to not only ensure that the public sees something that is a little bit more attractive, but it also helps to encourage a developer to think more about the design of their site. Along with the idea of that visual protection, we have specific screening requirements. Understanding this is an industrial district and there's a lot of industrial facilities and equipment, all of that equipment must be visually screened with some attention to aesthetics. So as part of all of the requirements that I mentioned before are for any developments that are not data centers that go into the PERT district. What I'll go through now are PERT specific components. So if a developer comes in underneath the PERT with a data center, they also have to follow additional criteria. There's really two ways that data centers are addressed in this ordinance. The first is this PERT district. The second is through conditional use. I'll go into it a little bit later, but I just want to point out that the requirements here that we have identified are for this optional zoning district. The idea here is to codify a series of requirements specifically for data centers so that even before we receive a land development, we have an expectation of that development will follow guidelines and requirements that have been established with the goals of the community in mind, and not risk not having a specific requirement under a conditional use process. So if a data center comes into, if a data center application is submitted underneath the PERT, it is limited to 500,000 square feet per building, which is comparable to some of the larger warehouses we have in South Whitehall. So this does not allow for anything larger than that to avoid million square foot and so forth types of buildings. They're limited to 50 feet in height, which is around the same height that is already in the industrial zone. It's a minimum of 350 feet setback from public roads and residential areas. Again, current zoning setbacks for the industrial zone are at 50 feet. The benefit here is that we, again, are utilizing that idea of buffering proportionate to the impacts. Data centers being a new use, we understand the impacts are significant. By having this minimum 350-foot setback, it establishes enough space for the areas to include significant buffering and just to have a lot of space in the idea of that conservation subdivision approach. The setbacks, I'll reiterate, are 7 times what the standard setbacks are in the industrial zone. Some of the other data center controls that we have, that pedestrian zone that I mentioned in the beginning, 20 feet from the roadway to include the shade trees, the 10-foot wide trail, and the split rail fence are also required. Instead of just a 50-foot buffer area, we have a transition zone that, depending on the size of the setbacks, depending on the site layout, this is an area that is utilized to preserve the view shed or preserve some of the existing agricultural areas, or the natural, or utilizing natural areas to plant in there. A buffer zone is identified in the ordinance and in the design guidelines that is very intentional and specific to shield the view of these buildings from that pedestrian zone. Developers are required to use either landscaping, berms, or walls to shield a minimum of 18 feet from the elevation of that pedestrian zone. This is in addition to all of the other transition zone and that pedestrian zone, as I mentioned before. It's really the combination of these 3 zones that allow for different benefits, not just the dissipating of sound, but also to encourage a lot of the natural resource and agricultural resource preservation goals, and with the pedestrian goals. Again, there's site design and facade requirements to break up the boxiness of any buildings. This is important even if a lot of this will be hidden behind some of those buffer zones, just to establish an aesthetic that does not directly impact the surrounding area. Noise generation is a significant concern with data centers. The township has established a series of noise control requirements to address this. The first being that any land development coming in would have to provide a pre-construction noise study prepared by a certified noise engineer that is used to model the expected noise levels expected by that data center. The study will also need to identify sensitive locations surrounding it, whether that be residential areas, existing houses, schools, and so forth, and provide specific mitigation strategies to ensure that noise is directed away from those sensitive areas. The study also requires decibel level measurements on the property line, so we understand what the baseline is and what the noise levels are even prior to construction. This is important because the noise control is also codified in here, that we have a very specific objective noise limit for data centers. Nothing higher than 67 decibel. The facility cannot be higher than 67 decibels at the property line, when it's facing industrial uses, and it cannot be higher than 57 decibels facing all other uses. Maintenance and testing of backup generators is expected, but we wanted to make sure that that is not abused. And so specific parameters is included to require that the maintenance and testing of those backup generators are only on certain days, and to establish that they cannot be, that if they are done in areas outside of that, there are repercussions. The applicants will also be required to prepare a post-construction noise monitoring plan to ensure that those objective decibel level readings at the property line, to ensure that the township is aware of when those, if those noises exceed those, and to work with the developer on how that monitoring is conducted long-term. The benefit of having objective noise criteria gives that directly to the potential developer even before they consider the site. If that cannot be achieved, or if there is a site design that can be adjusted, that can be addressed initially during that sound modeling. So it gives them the idea, it's not just how much noise will it generate, but making sure that they never reach those lines. In addition to the noise impacts, we identify and we require that every land development that comes in provides a community environmental impact statement. These impact statements must address the potential impacts, both positive and negative, on traffic, emergency services and fire protection, water supply, sewage disposal, solid waste disposal, school facilities and budget, and municipal revenues and expenses. Additionally, an evaluation will need to be on environmental impacts, and if necessary, provide mitigation strategies for things such as air quality, surrounding soil quality, surrounding water quality, groundwater sources, and wildlife habitat. These environmental impact statements are required at the beginning in the application is submitted. Throughout the land development process, there are many reviews in place that address a lot of these items. But before we even get to that point, we want both the staff and the consultants and the public to be on the same page when we understand what the potential impacts could be. And this establishes a conversation to address those impacts prior to the project moving forward through the land development process. The benefit here is to, again, have all that information clear and upfront to avoid missing or not having questions answered too late in the process. This also helps to direct a lot of the review, whether it be through the Township's Landscape and Shade Tree Commission, Environmental Advisory Council, Public Safety Commission, or the number of consultants that the Township already employs to look at things specifically regarding utilities and other community impacts. So to recap, tonight, the zoning ordinance amendment is proposed, which addresses data centers in two ways. First, it is to provide a clear definition of data centers, which as of today, the township's zoning ordinance does not define data centers. It is a use unprovided for. If a land development came in today for a data center, the township does not have any specific criteria associated with that. This provides that specific criteria for data centers, defines them so there's no misinterpretation of what they are, and it permits them in two ways. Only in the industrial zone under a conditional use process. This conditional use process is for a data center that is less than 150,000 square feet. The idea here is that the impacts of 150,000 square foot data center are probably less than something larger. The second option is if the developer who wants to do something larger than 150,000 square feet, but again, cannot exceed 500,000 square feet, is willing to opt into the PERT district. This PERT district really establishes the criteria and the conditions that we would likely look at in a conditional use process, but establishes them upfront and provides very clear direction as to how to meet those conditions so that we can ensure that we have the ability to have the conversation about the concerns of the community with this new type of development. Just for clarity, if you're looking at the ordinance, the amending ordinance also updates existing definitions and fixes inconsistencies that are necessary to ensure that the PERT can be added and that it adds a PERT as an optional zoning district. This also includes the township, the design guidelines in the township zoning ordinance, and it updates the township zoning map to reflect the PERT. What you'll see on the screen is just a recap of, prior to tonight, all of the meetings throughout the year that we have been discussing the Jordan Valley and the PERT ordinance. As Attorney Zader mentioned, that this has gone to multiple boards, including the Township Planning Commission and the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. And that this has been discussed at length, mostly since June of this year. Attorney Zader identified the particular requirements from the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, or the MPC. What you see on the screen here, again, those requirements identified and how the township met those requirements, including the public notices that were sent out. As Tom mentioned, in addition to the legal requirements, the township has provided additional outreach, including the township e-newsletter, information on the website, and additional mailings to property owners within 1,000 feet of the property. On the next couple of slides, I'll just kind of highlight some of those notices. Again, the newspaper publication, which was in the Parkland Press on September 24th and October 1st. Notice to the property owners, by law, we only need to notify the property owners within the industrial zone, since that's the zone being amended. Certified letters were provided to all of those property owners, and those were confirmed and delivered on October 3rd. In addition to the certified letters, many of you have probably seen the postcard provided here. The map below shows the boundary of all the additional properties that we mailed the postcard to, and in addition to providing the certified letters to the property owners to try to get the word out to nearby properties who may be of interest to this zoning ordinance amendment. We also posted the property. By law, we only need to have a small little sign on the side of the road. Many of you have probably seen the large signs along the exterior of the property, including on Cedar Crest Boulevard, Orfield Road, and Mock Chunk Road. And again, the township provided additional information, including the updates to the township website, that project hub I spoke about initially, and information in the township lobby. So that's the end of my presentation on information on the PERT. I'll hand it back over to the board and to Attorney Zader.
Thank you, Mr. Stroller. At this point, based on the agenda I outlined originally, I would extend to the Board of Commissioners an opportunity to either make any comments that you may have or ask any questions that you may have of staff.
Thank you, Attorney Zader. Good evening again, and thank you all for being here tonight. I want to acknowledge the work that the staff has put into developing and presenting this evening. We appreciate your diligence. The careful and critical monitoring of emerging land use is especially important in light of Governor Shapiro's recent executive order issued in November of 2024, which fast tracks at the state level the permitting process for data centers across Pennsylvania, as well as the governor's announcement just in June of this year that Amazon would invest at least $20 billion to establish cloud computing and AI innovation campuses across Pennsylvania. This state-level directive underscores the urgency for municipalities like ours to proactively address the local impacts of such rapidly developing uses. And I applaud the staff for presenting this evening what the township would be facing if a data center was proposed here by an applicant without addressing this issue. The proposed overlay is forward-looking and a protective step for the community. The PERT overlay does not make a way for data centers. They are permitted, as Chris presented this evening. We must provide for all uses, and they would be permitted in the industrial district. This overlay assures that if and when a center was proposed within the township, the applicant would be required to meet clear, rigorous standards that reflect our community's values and priorities. I'm not going to review all of the data that Chris went through, but certainly the generous 200-foot setbacks and buffers, pedestrian walkways, strict architectural and design standards, noise control, and environmental concerns as well. I appreciate and applaud the township for going above and beyond the announcements and notifications to the community through our newsletter and postcards and posting of the property. This information has been available on our township throughout the process to advise and educate our residents, which included the slides from tonight's presentation. Throughout this process, we have urged our residents and prioritize transparency and citizen input, making community engagement a central part of policy development. We had a total of 13 public meetings held here in this township building. They were all virtually streamed for live participation, and they were recorded and posted to the township website for public access. We understand that this is a significant topic for our community. We thank you all for being here this evening. And once the board has had opportunity to make comments, we will open up the floor for public comment. At this time, I'll ask if any of the other commissioners had a public comment they would like to make.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I want to thank staff for the presentation. I want to thank the public for being here tonight and for being so engaged. I'd just like to offer some additional thoughts and reiterate some of what's already is said from the standpoint of a member of this board. One of the most important roles that the five of us have as township commissioners is not just to review issues and plans as they come before us, but also to proactively plan for what may come before us in the future. I know I speak for myself, having seen the news over the past year and a half. The emergence of data centers as a use was extremely concerning to me, seeing the impacts that data centers had on communities across the country, and even more concerning, seeing municipal entities not properly prepare and having their communities overrun by this emerging use. So that sense of urgency combined with the reality that under Pennsylvania law, until the law is changed, we have to provide for every use. Data centers are going to be allowed in South Whitehall Township, be it through an ordinance or be it through a challenge to the zoning ordinance by a particular developer. So taking sort of those two things into mind, like I said, it really underscored the urgency that the township do whatever it can to protect against the effects of data centers when and if they come to South Whitehall Township. Now, what most townships do, not just for data centers, but for all other uses, is when a new use comes online, becomes popular in various industries, the townships will appropriately define it in their zoning ordinance and maybe put some parameters around what that use may look like. That's what a lot of communities have done with respect to data centers. But as we learn more about data centers, the impacts they have, the size and scope of them, I particularly thought it was important that South Whitehall Township take all the additional steps necessary. Municipalities sometimes, when providing for particular uses, will provide for conditional uses, building in the definitions, the standard requirements, as well as a list of specific conditions that must be met in order for approval. This ordinance has done that with those smaller uses. But what really makes the ordinance we're considering tonight unique is that it doesn't just go one step further, it goes 10 or 20 steps further. By enacting the PERT provisions of the ordinance, we are going far and beyond the normal requirements for conditional use. The ordinance, I strongly encourage everybody, if you haven't already, take a look at the ordinance on the township website, and you'll be able to see the depth of the protections and the parameters and sort of the scope of what's permitted. So I strongly encourage you to look into that. So really what the township has done is take those additional steps. And I've had the opportunity now, as we've discussed this in public over the past couple months, to look at what other municipalities have done in the Lehigh Valley and beyond. And having reviewed those ordinances, I can say that South Whitehall Township, through the adoption of the PERT, is doing more than any other municipality in the Lehigh Valley to prepare for the emergence of data centers. And that sounds positive because on our part, we're building in a lot of those environmental protections. But the reality is that there are a lot of municipalities in the Lehigh Valley that aren't and will face significant challenges as a result of this use. And throughout this process, I've sort of looked back and have compared this to the emergence of warehouses 20 to 25 years ago. You had municipalities, you had a relatively new use, certainly in the scope of where warehouses were 20 to 25 years ago. You had municipalities that were not adequately prepared to address the impacts. And what did we wind up with? We wound up with warehouses that are close to roads, that have those 50-foot setbacks, that have that boxy character that Chris described, that don't provide for environmental impact statements, that don't provide for green space or buffering or security measures or fences or recreational opportunities. And I think it's on us now as municipal leaders to make sure that what happened to the Lehigh Valley with warehouses 25 years ago doesn't happen with data centers. Because imagine where we would be as a region had municipalities taken the approach to warehouses as we're taking to data centers today. And imagine where we'd be if every municipality in the Lehigh Valley takes the approach to data centers that we are taking today. It was just a very poignant example of how we can sort of learn from past challenges, and it helps us plan for growth and preservation in the future. I really, again, would like to thank the staff for their extraordinary work on this ordinance and protecting our landscapes, our properties, our neighborhoods. I'd like to thank our advisory boards, our Planning Commission, and our Environmental Advisory Council in particular for their input. I'd like to thank, of course, each of you for being here tonight to learn more about this and to share your concerns and thoughts. And I'd like to thank all the citizens who have attended previous meetings, who have called the township, who have reached out to elected officials, Planning Commission members, to voice your concerns. Your concerns have been heard, and they are valued. The last thing I'll say, and this is tangential to this issue, but I was reminded of it when Commissioner Kelly mentioned the governor's executive order on the permitting process. We've been very clear in the past in trying to get the word out on this that there are efforts in Harrisburg underway, supported by members of the General Assembly and spearheaded by Governor Shapiro to strip local control of energy projects and data centers. Senate Bill 909 would require that local zoning rules for data centers couldn't be more stringent than any other industrial uses with respect to noise, lighting, and height restrictions. Governor Shapiro's lightning plan, House Bill 502, would centralize approval of such projects in a state-appointed reset board, removing local decision-making power. Decisions by the state to take municipalities' power away to provide for all the protections that we're providing for tonight are sort of underlined by this false notion that the township's incapable of properly planning for these uses. But what I would say, and this brings it back to the ordinance we're considering tonight, for those in Harrisburg, legislators, the governor, for those who doubt township's abilities to lead, for our township citizens and elected boards and advisory boards to govern ourselves, to protect our communities, to protect our environment, to protect our character, while allowing for appropriate economic growth. For those who have those doubts, look no further than this ordinance. Data centers are going to be a challenging use for any community to deal with. But I'm so glad that if this ordinance is adopted tonight, we will be in much better shape than most of our neighboring municipalities. And in the end, we'll be protecting those critical buffers and those critical resources for generations to come. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're all contributing to the growing demand for artificial intelligence in our lives through the use of our smartphones, e-commerce, cloud storage, and the increasing role of AI in education and business. Again, under Pennsylvania's Municipalities Planning Code, we are legally required to accommodate all legitimate land uses, including emerging uses such as data centers. In short, we cannot legally prohibit them from our municipality. Additionally, a fast-track permitting process was introduced at the state level in Harrisburg, and this could bypass meaningful local review and community input. This makes it even more important for us to proactively plan and zone for this use, not only to comply with state law, but to ensure development aligns with our own local values and priorities. We need to be prepared. This PERT overlay is both protective and proactive. It mandates a community and environmental study upfront to address critical environmental concerns early in the process. It also includes robust requirements for open space preservation, creation of wildlife habitats, extensive tree plantings, and the use of buffers and berms to screen data center campuses from surrounding areas. I want to assure you that your voices and your concerns are being heard, and we share many of the same concerns. And that's exactly why this overlay is being created. It's designed to specifically address the unique impacts of data centers, including energy and water consumption, noise, and air quality. With thoughtful planning and tools like this overlay, we can meet our legal obligations, protect the character of our community, and guide responsible growth of AI infrastructure in our region. Also want to just note that there are already centers proposed for Lackawanna, Bucks, Luzerne counties, and also Salem, Hazel, and Dorrance townships. So they're here.
So I just want to thank the staff for all their hard work, and thanks to the residents for coming out or online to voice your opinions and ask questions. We read the messages coming from the governor in regards to new technologies and the development of such. I think this overlay districts help us be proactive in addressing the associated issues that come with those emerging technologies. The landowner has a right to develop their land, and as a township, we are required by law to provide for the different zoning uses within the township. The staff developed this overlay with the intent of protecting our residents to the best of our legal abilities while maintaining the character of the township. We also need to respect the rights of the landowners to develop their land. This overlay provides additional protection to our residents than a conditional use application. It maintains the character of the township beyond what we currently have, yet still provides the landowner the opportunity to develop their land. Thank you to the staff for their work, and thank you to the residents for coming out and speaking.
Commissioner Johns, did you have any comment this evening?
Everyone, I want to thank the staff and the people for coming out. So I'm sorry if you don't understand me, but that's it.
Are there any other comments for the commissioners this evening? No comments. At this point,
with the commissioners having spoken, we'll open up to the public. And I believe, Commissioner Kelly, you have the list of those who have signed up to speak.
I do.
I think it'd be appropriate to use that list.
Very good. Thank you, Attorney Zader. I'm going to use the sign-in sheet and remind those that are prepared to speak this evening, we do have a 5-minute per person time limit. When you come up to the microphone, I would request that you please state your name and address for the record. This meeting is virtually streamed as well, so that people online, you'll need to speak into the microphone so they can hear you as well. The first person on the list is Sharon Fellinger-Ricker. Please come on up to the microphone.
My name is Sharon Fellinger-Ricker, and I reside at 1167 Edward Avenue. Full disclosure, I am a candidate for the Board of Commissioners for this election cycle, but it's extremely important that you understand none of my statements will be political. This is not Republican versus Democrat. This is about us. It's about us. It's about the residents. I want to begin my statement by saying that I appreciate the staff's work on the PERT overlay. I know that you have put a lot of work into it, so thank you. While I believe it is a start, there is definitely more work to be done to protect the land of the Jordan Valley and the neighbors, and frankly, the township and the board's authority. I personally am not in favor of AI data centers coming to South Whitehall Township, full disclosure. But I know that we must allow usage of land for whatever land can be used by law, which is why proper planning and zoning is so important. When preparing for the possibility of a data center, it is important to remember that this is a new type of land usage in the township. That means we are not able to predict all possible impacts. For that reason, we must plan for the unpredictable. Let me explain. Currently, it is written that a small data center are conditional and large data centers are use of right. That is concerning because use of right means that the Board of Commissioners cannot introduce any additional zoning conditions. The data center must follow the current zoning as is. For a new land use, we may not fully understand the impacts until the data center is up and running. Zoning should indicate all data centers, large or small, should be conditional, not use of right. This would allow the Board of Commissioners to make zoning adjustments if determined necessary. The Township Comprehensive Plan and other plans that we talked about earlier, they talk about sustainable growth. So why are we not requiring green energy like solar or geothermal? The Jordan Creek is directly adjacent to this area. This area is full of lush lands and resources that we don't want to disrupt. It is important to know that the data centers are not beneficial to their host communities. Some of the known impacts related to data centers that may be realized by our community include higher energy costs, depletion of natural resources, including water, reduced air quality, increased noise pollution. I'm now quoting from an article from The Guardian. Data centers' electricity demands have been accused of delaying the U.S. transition to clean energy and requiring fossil fuel plants to stay online, while their high level of water consumption has also raised alarm. Now public health advocates fear another environmental problem could be linked to them. They're called PFAS, or forever chemical pollution. Big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon need databases to store their servers and networks and networking equipment that process the world's digital traffic. And the artificial intelligence boom is driving demand for more facilities, end quote. Advocates, however, are particularly concerned over the facility's use of these PFAS gases, or F-gas, which can be potent greenhouse gases and may mean data centers' climate impact is worse than previously thought. Other F-gases turn into a type of dangerous compound that is rapidly accumulating across the globe. While speaking with a South Whitehall Township resident recently, she mentioned that her energy use has gone down by 8% since last year, yet she is paying 8% more. Impacts from a data center could drive that energy cost even higher. According to the Asthma Society, the Lehigh Valley is the third most challenging place in the country for those with asthma. Reduced air quality will affect residents with asthma and COPD, as well as other respiratory ailments. Studies have shown noise from these centers can pollute for up to 2 miles in every direction. Also noteworthy, these centers often only provide around 20 local permanent jobs. Is it worth it? Communities are notoriously fining these centers for compliance issues, but they are repeat offenders. The fines are not deterring their bad behavior. So I want to encourage the Board of Commissioners to consider putting absolutely every possible effort into discouraging AI centers from coming to South Whitehall Township. I know by law it's required, but we need to put every effort into preserving the Jordan Valley. The unique character of our community would likely be negatively affected and impacted. Please take away the use of right option and only agree to conditional use for this new land usage. Thank you.
I just want to take a moment if either Attorney Zader or staff had any particular comments you wanted to respond to, or we can move on if there's nothing specific.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'll mention something. And it's not going to make me popular given all the applause that I just heard, but it's the reality under the law. I've spent nearly 40 years practicing as an attorney, with the vast majority of that being a land use attorney. And most of that time, other than representing 2 municipalities and a zoning hearing board, I've represented developers and property owners. And I bring that experience to the benefit of South Whitehall when I talk with the Board of Commissioners and I talk with staff. And the reason I'm mentioning what I'm about to say is everybody needs to have an appreciation for what a conditional use is and what it isn't. The requirements spelled out for the PERT that staff has drafted are very severe, they're very stringent, they're very strong. And I can tell you that in my years as a development lawyer, if those were attached to a conditional use process, as opposed to a voluntary opt-in by right process, they wouldn't hold up. It would be challenged and the developer would succeed. The second reason I'm going to say something is this. There is a huge misconception about what a conditional use is and what can accomplish. And that misconception exists in municipalities, by planners, and even lawyers who don't do this day in and day out. And it's this. As a board, if this were a conditional use, the board does not have the ability to just listen to what the public has to say and listen to what their own concerns might be and attach conditions to address those issues. That's unlawful. Now, it happens a lot of times. And if you go to a lot of municipal meetings, whether it be zoning boards with special exceptions or commissioners and supervisors meetings with those kinds of proceedings occurring, you'll see conditions attached that seem to address things that have been brought up at the meeting. But the law in Pennsylvania is that in order to legitimately attach a condition to the grant of a conditional use approval, that condition must be in furtherance of the specific criteria that are in the ordinance already. You can't just pull out other requirements that you think might be appropriate. So if you have an ordinance such as we have here with all of these requirements under the PERT, and I'm telling you that if it weren't for the voluntary opt-in of a developer, many of those probably would not be enforceable. You have a problem on your hands as a township. So the PERT ordinance with the by right mechanism that staff has drafted, by requiring the developer upfront to sign a document that says the developer consents to abide by the requirements of the PERT ordinance, is effectively becoming a contract. And that will make it enforceable and not subject to challenge. And that has to occur up front. And that's why I believe what the township has proposed is more protective of the township interests than a watered down ordinance that is a conditional use approach.
Solicitor Zader, I just want to follow up because Ms. Fellinger-Ricker raised a concern about conditional use versus the PERT and saying we should stick with conditional use and do away with the by right uses under the PERT. In your expertise, and I think this is what you just alluded to, the requirements under the by right use in the ordinance, the PERT ordinance, are far and beyond stricter than that for conditional use. Correct?
Certainly far beyond the conditional use requirements for smaller data centers in the ordinance. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I just had a question for staff regarding, there was a comment included in the comments that Ms. Fellinger-Ringer stated about alternative energy sources. Has that been addressed by staff?
So alternative energy is a permitted use in virtually all zones in some regard. So it's already an existing use. It's already allowable in the industrial. Therefore, it's allowable in the PERT. We did not require it, but it's certainly an option.
Very good. Thank you. At this time, I'll go to the next person on our list, Celie Turner from Ware Mill Road.
Cecile Turner.
Just wait till you get to the microphone.
Okay,
the
sorry.
people online won't hear you.
Cecile Turner, and I live at historic 200-year-old property right smack next to the Jordan Creek and the dam and the covered bridge. And I am very concerned. I did not get any notification of this, and neither did my neighbor. And we are pretty close to Orfield Road, and we're right smack in the Jordan Valley. And I was told by a friend that lives in Upper Macungie that there was this stuff going on, and I had no clue. And I get the morning call, and I do read the newspaper, and there was nothing in the morning call, right? You didn't put anything in the morning call?
We didn't utilize the morning call. We utilized the Parkland Press.
Okay, well, you know what? The morning call is a much more comprehensive newspaper for people to know what's going on, I think. I'm really surprised at that.
Use of the Parkland Press is lawful. It has to be a newspaper of general circulation in the township.
I'll say it's disappointing. I was clueless. And I've lived there for 45 years, right smack next to the township maintained property. The township took my land to build the boardwalk. They started building it, and then they raised it higher without any input from us. Then they're supposed to maintain buffers. All of this was we had many meetings beforehand with township personnel when Randy Cope was here and all this stuff. Many meetings, my husband and I at that time, and my son even. This was supposed to be worked out where we're not getting the buffer so how can we expect the township to actually show up and do what they say they're going to do as far as buffers and require this? Because to this day, I don't have a good buffer. And I have all these people trekking up and down the boardwalk when we used to have total privacy. It's a bummer. 45 years living there, and that's why we bought the property. And it is a historic. By the way, the name of the bridge is an era. It's not Goose Bridge. It's not any of these other, it's not Ware's Bridge. It's Seeger's Bridge. You really should fix that. It's Seeger's, honestly. Okay? And I am concerned. I have a hard science degree from Georgia Tech, and I know about at least forever chemicals. I know about this. I also have other degrees, but I am concerned about just what the gal before me said. You don't really know what's going to happen until you get into it. And this is new. This whole data thing is new. And there's potential for a lot of bad stuff happening. I think we need to be open to that and very careful. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you'd like to.
So, ma'am, thank you for bringing that up. And one of the things we want to get across, we weren't on the board when that occurred, and we'd like to believe that our approach to the residents has changed. That if you have an issue, that you feel free to contact the township so that we can start addressing that. So if there was issues with the buffer, right, that we can pass it on to Public Works and we can start dealing with some of those issues. And I agree, I have an interest in history and you are correct, but it's a county bridge and they are the ones that name it. So I agree, I know.
Thank you.
I would just add to that, if you do have concerns about the buffering and the trail, please reach out to the township manager. We'd be more than happy to try and do what was right, even if past staff and commissioners did not.
I would ask Attorney Zader to please, I'm sorry.
I just had one thing. I have worked with Cecile before. I've met her and her son out there on the property. She requested 8 white cedars. We planted them, but I can follow up with you on any concerns that you have. Well, we can address that if we have to.
Thank you, Herb. Attorney Zader, could you please comment on the comment that was made regarding buffers and the ability of the township to enforce? The difference with this ordinance is, as you had stated earlier, it's almost a contract with an applicant. Could you please explain the difference between that and what this homeowner has experienced?
Sure, glad to. I respect what you said. Excuse me, it sounds like Herb Bender is going to be talking to you about the buffer concern there. But we are talking apples and oranges. The township will get with you, ma'am, to talk to you about the buffer and see what can be done, what should be done. But the buffer requirements under the ordinance that's being proposed, and it's up for consideration this evening, if this ordinance will be adopted and staff talked about what those buffer requirements are, what the setback requirements are, those would have to be shown on a plan that would come before this township as part of the land development process. And ultimately, if that plan is approved, those buffer plantings would be secured so that they would get planted And there's a maintenance period that exists under the law that would dictate that they have to be maintained, actually be maintained in perpetuity, but there's a minimum period in which there's security posted to assure that they don't die. And then, of course, the setback requirements, which is probably equally as important, those will be spelled out on the plan, and the building permit will only allow the structures to be built in accordance with the plan that was approved, and those setbacks would have to be followed. So that's the mechanism by which, if there would be a plan come before the township, and if it would be approved, that'll be a lengthy process, but that would dictate the protection.
And just a comment regarding the lack of notification. I believe your home is probably more than 1,000 feet from the property border that we're discussing this evening. Okay.
Yes. Also, I want to encourage each one of you. I'm sorry that happened to you. I really am. And that was before my time. I assure you things are different now. You're being heard, and Herb will help you. But I want to let you all know that the township website is the central hub of information. So if a lot of people don't get the morning call, a lot of people don't get Parkland Press, please go to our website. It's right there front and center. And actually, we just added a link on the front for public notices. So you can go click on it and you can find all the public notices wherever they may exist in the township, whether it's zoning or planning. You can go right there. It's a one-stop shop. But please, please look at the meetings for the week. Look at the agendas. They're all posted. If you can't attend in person, you can attend from home. We have links for all of that. If you need any help with navigating, please reach out to any of us staff. Yeah, but please, please check. And that way, you know, you're covered and it's all there. So thank you.
And one other tool the township utilizes is an e-newsletter. You can sign up on the township website. You can get an email of the newsletter that comes out. This was included in the September e-newsletter as well. We've pushed out the information every way that we were able to. So I'm sorry that you didn't see that.
Yeah, I wanted to just expound upon the buffers one more time. So as noted by Chris Stroller earlier, so within that 350-foot front setback in the ordinance, you have 20-foot pedestrian zone, a transition zone, a berm, including evergreen screening row with 6-foot minimum at planting, 18-foot height. So that includes the entire buffer zone, berm, and planted buffer, an 8-foot max security fence, all within that 350-foot front setback. So it's quite extensive.
I can just add to that. So the buffering is very specific in the required landscaping. As Attorney Zader pointed out, that would need to be provided in a land development plan. So these land development plans, again, tonight, we're not talking about a land development. We're talking about establishing the ordinance that is a requirement in addition to the township subdivision and land development ordinance. Any land development that comes in related to this needs to follow the specific requirements that we've established in this zoning ordinance, particularly to data centers. It also would need to follow the standard subdivision and land development process. That process is dictated by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Code. The township has a subdivision land development ordinance that already addresses a number of these items on a site-specific basis, including a required landscape plan, including required identification of buildings in relation to the setbacks that are in there. These additional criteria that are presented in this optional zoning overlay go above and beyond that. So not only do they need to meet those SALDO requirements, they also need to meet these requirements. In particular, as you can see on the screen, the required buffer zone has very specific criteria of what kind of trees can be planted there and the layout of those trees to ensure maximum shielding, visual shielding. And these are reviewed not just by the township engineer and township staff and the Township Planning Commission, but also by the Township Landscape and Shade Tree Commission.
Very good, thank you. Moving on, our next person, I believe it's Ella Marks. I hope I'm, Ula, I apologize. You would just again state your name and address.
Ula Marks, address is 4324 Elias Court, close to Limekiln Road. Back-to-back neighbor with Celia Turner. We've lived in that position, in that place for the same amount of years. But I have just one concern that hasn't really been brought up at this point. And that is, it was mentioned in the information that Chris brought up earlier, and that really I wasn't aware of the drainage on water and also on electricity for managing these data centers. You all know here, if particularly all of us who live right next to Jordan Creek, that has been dry for most of the summer and the fall. I have a big vegetable garden. Bushes have died. Some small trees have died because we have had no rainfall practically. Now you're talking about the data center needing a lot of water. And where is that water going to come from if we continue to have droughts? We're in a climate change, not just this part of the country, but pretty much all over the world. But this is where we live, and this is what we're concerned about now. That is my concern, that we're not going to have enough water for our households, for our schools, you know, for just livelihood, for the farmers that still farm here. We happen to be part of a small group of homes that share a well. If that runs dry, you know, where are we going to go? Jordan Creek has had no water for, I don't know how many months, 7, 8 months. It's finally now starting to dribble a little bit. But that's not enough if a lot of the water that we have available is going to go towards the data centers' needs. So that's a big concern of mine. And also maybe the environmental concerns in general. It was mentioned individuals with asthma. I have some family members with respiratory problems. And I don't want to add to their needs if some fumes or whatever else is emitted from the data centers is going to be detrimental to their health or everybody's health who lives here. So that was my 2 points that I wanted to bring up, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm going to let staff answer. Okay, I'll defer to staff first. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to highlight again in my previous comment about the ordinance provisions in conjunction with the land development review process. So currently in the land development review process, every application for land development, we look at utility usage. And so when it becomes a site-specific focus, when I understand what is being proposed to be built at that location, the township, public works, and our utility engineers review those plans and identify whether that's going to be public water or not public water. That's handled at the land development review process. What this ordinance does in addition to that, to take that one level higher, is at the initial application, before we even get to that review, we require the information to start those conversations. So these developments are reviewed through the standard process with the Planning Commission. But in addition to this, these environmental impact statements provide us a starting point for the conversation, to have a very specific conversation on what those potential impacts could use by looking at the size of the facility, what they're proposing as far as water usage, and providing that to the township staff to make comments on that and how that reflects the goals and consistency with our plans, including our landscapes plan. It's provided to the township's environmental advisory council to review that and provide comments to that. And that all goes to the Township Planning Commission and then ultimately the Board of Commissioners. Through that process, it becomes very challenging if we don't have the specific environmental impacts identified early on, and it becomes, say, a resident coming at the last minute and asking a question when we're already further through the process. So the goal here is to provide not just the information to us as staff to start to have those, but also to identify to potential developers concerns that we think we may have to add to those impacts.
I'd also like to add, unlike many of the municipalities in the Lehigh Valley, the township operates its own water utility system. So if a public water request is made, the township has direct control over that allocation of the water. It's a decision made by the local governing body in accordance with staff and with engineering input. So that is a little bit of a more it's a use that is then looked at on a more stringent basis with the fact that we have that utility authority.
An additional comment based on Ms. Marks's comment. I want to thank you for raising issues of the Jordan Creek, of water usage, of the impact on wells. You know, I want to extend obviously an open invitation to any members of the public as you have specific concerns that are more in alignment, not necessarily with the zoning ordinance, but with the land development process and all the tools and ordinances and state laws and regulations that the township relies on when evaluating specific plans. Please send those concerns to us, to township staff, come to planning commission meetings. All of those concerns addressed in the land development process are more than welcome, and they inform the township and help us get better as we revise our policy. So thank you for those specific concerns, and that's an open invitation to anyone.
I just wanted to add some comments on the importance of the impact statements. By requiring them early in the process as part of the initial land development submission, not only is it available to staff, professionals, board members, public also has an opportunity to review those impact statements. And if there are additional concerns related to that impact statement during the land development process, the public has an opportunity to raise those concerns after the review of those impact statements. So it was really an effort to try and get as many issues as we could ahead of the land development so that everybody has a clear understanding of what these potential impacts are. And most importantly, everybody has an opportunity to comment on any of those impact statements. Thank
you. And Attorney Zader, I just had I'm sorry.
If I could add one comment to that, thank you, Dave, quickly. As Dave mentioned, the public has access to that early on. All of the reviews that are advisory boards, commissions, councils, those are also public meetings, and we encourage public participation in those meetings. So anytime a project is being reviewed by, say, the Environmental Advisory Council, the Park and Rec Commission, the Public Safety Commission, by having those impact statements up front, you're able to use that to look at what concerns you might want to address early in the project in those individual topic advisory boards.
Thank you. Attorney Zader, I didn't know if you had any additional comments, specifically some of the concerns that were brought up regarding water, electric, drought, asthma, from a legal perspective, again, back to the MPC, the authority of the township to restrict or put conditions on.
At this point, I have nothing to add beyond what staff has said.
Very good. Thank you. Next on the list for speakers is Glenn Gwanowski.
My name is Glenn Gwanowski. I live at 1461 Red Maple Lane. In the spirit of transparency, I am running for South Whitehall Township Commissioner this November. I believe the ordinance as it's now drafted is inadequate as it pertains to data centers and the issues that surround them. There are significant power usages by data centers. They run 24/7 around the clock, And they will, based on what we've learned from the data centers already up and running, adversely impact consumers, the residents of our township, who are going to see continued rate increases from PPL and other providers. There's actually a bill pending in New Jersey now that's going to require data centers to issue quarterly reports on their water and electricity usage. So this is not just a smoke in the wind kind of a concern, but it's a real concern. If we're looking at crafting an ordinance for the inevitability of data centers, I think we need to utilize 21st century thinking to address this. We should require utilization of green energy sources, solar, wind, geothermal, to offset the energy demands. We should require energy efficient building construction. And we should require reports of any anticipated impact on residents as part of the application. There's also the issue of high water consumption. We live in a time of climate change and weather extremes, droughts or floods. There's actually a group of senators in Harrisburg right now proposing a bill that will require a couple of things that would help. And these are the kind of things we should incorporate in an ordinance. It should require pre-application meetings between developers and local officials. We should require any developers to provide will serve letters from water, sewer, electric, and fiber infrastructure providers confirming that existing systems can support their project at full build out and not just during the phases of construction. And we should also require them to identify any anticipated impact on the residents. This ordinance does none of that. There's also the concern that's already been stated, air pollution, chemical treatment of water, the forever chemicals. These are potent greenhouse gases. They can contaminate groundwater. We need to require reporting on what chemicals are going to be used in these facilities, the environmental safeguards that will be implemented, and the impact on the community as part of any application. How should this ordinance be changed? I think we need to put in requirements for green energy for power sources and energy efficient building. We should require pre-application meetings with township officials and consultants, with the public available as well to participate and hear what the developers have to say. We should require will serve letters, as I previously described. We should require identification of any impact on residents, financial and environmental. We should require periodic environmental testing and utility usage reports to be available to the township and to the residents. You know, ultimately, this is about sustainable development. This is about doing things right. And as we talk about the municipal planning code, again, I suggest you turn to section 105, the purpose of the act, which in part indicates an intended purpose to protect the health, safety, and morals of the communities and to promote effective utilization of renewable energy sources. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will turn to Attorney Zader. I'm curious on, I don't know if you've got the information in front of you, section 105 of the MPC. Are you able to comment on that particular?
I don't have it in front of me, but as a matter of statutory construction, and certainly I know the MPC well, but with every statute, the purposes provision themselves are never an enforceable aspect of a statute, MPC included. But to Mr. Gunowski's point, I would just say this. Every ordinance that exists in every municipality can always be improved upon. And if the board were to proceed to adopt the ordinance this evening, nothing prevents staff and the commissioners from continuing to look at ways to improve. I think the point that was made early on by Tom Petrucci and Chris Stroller is, and actually by several of you commissioners, including you, Commissioner Kelly, is that data centers are coming. And the point is, let's be prepared as best we can. So if you were to adopt this ordinance tonight, you've gone farther than any municipality in the Lehigh Valley region and probably farther than almost any municipality in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Is there room for improvement? Sure. So take that up next month and the month after.
Yeah, I also wanted to add a comment on the proposed legislation. To the best of my knowledge and understanding, I don't have it in front of me either, but I believe the committee that's being referenced is actually at the state level that would then remove local authority. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get ahead of in terms of ensuring that the township has local control and can continue to address local concerns that are being raised, for example, this evening. So having it being done at the state level in the committee isn't necessarily in the best interests of the township residents. But I believe that is the legislation that was referenced. Again, correct me if I'm wrong.
I have a couple of Mr. Gronowski's points raised a couple of questions for me. I don't know if this is best directed to staff or Solicitor Zader. But just if one of you could give an overview for the public benefit of the township's powers with respect to power and how that might be addressed with potential uses here. And also some of the ways in which this ordinance or maybe other provisions of township code would cover things like public engagement sessions, meeting with staff, will serve letters, and any chemicals used in these plants to make sure that we sufficiently are covering all the bases that Mr. Gronowski raised.
There was a lot in there. So I think no problem. I think some of the issues with requirements are perfunctory in our normal land development process. Pre-application meetings are typically handled with developers during the land development process, early in the land development process. Additionally, will serve letters for sewer and water are both required as part of that submission. As Tom alluded, we are the township is the water and sewer provider. So any water or sewer needs will be run through the township. And I lost my track.
The power.
Well,
the power.
The township's role in power, and then also potential for chemicals in being used by these.
So the other thing at play is the role of municipality with regards to power. Some of the things that are being discussed are not at the purview of a municipality. Power, for example, is a regional requirement. It's under a utility. There's not a lot of regulations a municipality can put on a utility. We certainly can't restrict power. The comments about the chemicals and forever chemicals, I think is something I've written it down as a note to ask to be included in any impact statements if we get that. So that we all have an opportunity to review chemicals that are used in the facility. And, we're getting a lot of really good feedback, and I'm taking notes. And I'm glad that Attorney Zader brought up the fact that we can certainly make amendments to this and improve it as we go. I'm certainly taking notes and always thinking about that.
I just want to thank you, Dave, for that feedback, and also for the benefit of the public. I remember several years ago being in your position, sitting on the other side of this dais and asking questions like the ones you're asking, and I never got any answers. So please know that your questions are being taken into consideration and your feedback is valuable. That's why we're writing it down. So all of your concerns in one form or another will be addressed. So thank you for your participation.
So I have to agree with Mr. Gronowski. I hope they use as much renewable energy as possible. If it's got enough power to power them, we'll have to wait and see if anybody does apply. In regards to chemicals, I can tell you there's an OSHA requirement that companies have to provide to the fire departments the list of chemicals on site and have the appropriate documentation. So if there is an emergency at their facility, and that information is shared with the township as well. So they are required by law outside of the ordinance to share with us the chemicals that they have in their facility.
Very good. Any other comments from the board? Very good. Next speaker is Sharon Holden. Good evening.
My name's Sharon Holden. I live in 1909 Walbert Avenue. And a lot of my questions have already been answered this evening. I was hoping that we could say, no, we're writing a law that we're not allowing data centers in this township, but I guess the state has overseen it on that. I do think though, and I agree with them, anything that you can write on environmental and protection, if there's anything you can do in this ahead of time, that would be great. I remember when it was a chemical plant there and I had to come before the township many years ago about the chemicals coming out of their air stacks, and we had to require them putting a spoiler on because everybody in the township was getting headaches, and they were dumping in the Jordan, and whenever it rained, they were really heavy. And I don't want to have to face these things down the line when we're already getting sick. And also with the water and the sewer, well, he said the township with the water and sewer, but the township doesn't run water or sewer on the other side of Huckleberry Ridge. That's why Jerris can't sell it to developers. I mean, so I'm not sure where they would be running their water and sewer because it only is on this side of the ridge and the other is on wells. And like you said, wells are going dry. And so these are concerns, and I think these are concerns that should be answered ahead of time, not after. And if any way you can write any of these in, that would be a great help. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The next speaker is Scott SWT.
Good evening. I'm Scott SWT. I live at 2764 Carroll Lane. A few questions and clarifications. Where do we come up with I'll back up. From what I understand, there's two options if somebody wanted to build a data center in this proposal, that if it's under 150,000 square feet, they could do it as a conditional use. Or if it's over that, they could go with the overlay. Is that correct? Okay. Where do we get the 150,000 square feet?
It's roughly the size of the warehouses that we have in is it industrial commercial, in the industrial commercial zone, which is just over here. So we try to look at something comparable to what do we have existing in the township.
I'm concerned that that's too high because a typical data center, like they have tiers of data center, the biggest data center is a tier 4, and that's 50,000 square feet and up. So if I were looking to site a data center somewhere and I wanted to maybe do 100,000 square foot, oh, look, I can do it by conditional use. I don't have to get the overlay. I don't have to have these nice setbacks. I can pretty much have my way at a reduced cost. So I think we should look at that threshold.
I know Attorney Zader talked about the challenges with the conditional use process. One of the other benefits that we see as township staff with enacting this very specific optional zoning overlay is the opportunity to use a lot of the guidance behind it to address the conditional use hearings, understanding that maybe 7 times the standard setbacks in the industrial zone may not stick in a conditional use hearing, but by having the support of this, if it were to be adopted along with the South Whitehall landscapes plan and the comprehensive plan, we could have a little bit more informed conditions as part of that process. But again, it's not locked in with conditional use.
Chris, what are the dimensional, and I know they're in the ordinance, but if you just go over the dimensional requirements for the conditional use, the data centers that would fall under conditional use?
So it would have to be under 150,000 square feet. And I believe, and it's in the packet, I believe it's the same height. If it's not the same height, it's 40 feet.
And the setbacks and buffering?
Yes, the setbacks and buffering are the same. Actually, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm just because I'm looking at the ordinance here, and
well, the setbacks are. I'm sorry, the buffering is not as extensive. That's the difference. The setbacks are still the same, 350 feet from residential areas and public roads, but there's not the specific buffering zones.
Right, and would it also include some of the other amenities that the PERT mandates?
It does not include any of the architectural design standards.
Yeah, these data centers are ugly. If I were wanting to site a data center, and I would pick the sweet spot and say, okay, we're going to do conditional, and we're just going to put an ugly box in your township, and there's not much you can do about it. So something to think about. A book just came out by Stephen Voss. It was published. He's a Washington Post photographer about data center siting, and it's kind of eye-opening to see. So Stephen, S-T-P-H-E-N, Voss. Couple other clarifications. Noise levels. I saw 57 or 67 decibels, depending what the adjacent usage is. Those seem a little high. I'm wondering where we came up with those.
Sorry. If you look at, I don't have the source of where it comes from, but the equivalent levels of, there's charts that are put out on sound levels. I believe it's around 60 decibel levels is similar to inside of an office. Again, I am not a sound expert. I don't have this. But as going through this process, and we've reviewed this ordinance, I'm trying to think, probably in July was the first time we reviewed the ordinance fully with the Board of Commissioners and with legal. Around that time, we also were able to get some guiding documents from other, I believe Penn Future is the organization that put out some model documents, and this was around the recommended decibel levels for that.
Yeah, 60 decibels is the equivalent of a normal conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's logarithmic. So the reason I ask is these noises tend to be just a din, a constant din, as opposed to, a car passing, which might, you might hit 60 decibels, but then it's back down to 40 decibels. So in knowing what that background noise becomes, it's, you might say, oh, 67 decibels isn't that loud, but when it's constant, it grates on you. Yeah. I found one ordinance, Front Royal, I think it's Virginia. They enacted 52 decibels at night, 59 decibels during the day, but they don't differentiate what the adjacent use is. So I would just say we should probably look at maybe tweaking those numbers.
And so as part of this, we also have that pre-construction noise study with the modeling, but it also includes the measurements at the property line existing. So understanding the industrial zone is relatively spread out. It's a very large area, about 900 acres. The idea of if these were in locations that were much more developed and there wasn't as much space to direct. So this is essentially giving guidance to a developer to say, this is your cap. When you're providing your noise study, again, that noise study at the beginning of the land development process, as we start to go through the board's review, that can also be something that we make a comment on to identify as your required noise study identifies modeling that is showing noise being directed towards our residential areas. What can you do to reorient that noise to go away from that? This is essentially our final level of requirement for that, but it's important for us to have that up front while we're reviewing that noise, that modeled noise.
I have one more question about the PERT, and then I have another question about the Jordan Valley District overall. So within the PERT, would mixed use be allowed? I'm thinking if this is a campus, I mean, kind of backing up a minute, not focusing on data centers, but if it's a campus, I can imagine that you might want to have a cafe there so that people aren't forced to go off campus to, go down the hill to, Cedar Crest and Walbert and get food or snacks or,
a beverage?
I'm just pulling up the actual proposed ordinance that lists the allowed uses. So the primary permitted uses within the PERT are the ones that shown there, A through F. These are all existing uses defined in the township ordinance. As far as a mixed use, the mixed use itself is, I believe, a use in the township zoning ordinance that's not allowed, but one of the potential incentives that we're including is the idea of a business and professional office where that can potentially have some of that. Also the idea of flex space, which is multiple uses within one building, particularly the idea of a mixed use facility on its own, no, but if it were part of a different type of development that meets these criteria potentially. And also in here are the accessory uses. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
It did. I just want to make sure that we're not going into those blinders on and saying, no, you can't have a little cafe in one of the buildings.
Yeah, the idea is to have something there that supports not just employees there, but also we recognize the potential connections with Parkland High School and having something that can benefit career training for those students, whether that at having that really outside of maybe the data center, but the idea of these innovative uses that could go in there opposed to what we have experienced so far in the industrial district.
Thank you. So my last question has to do with the Jordan Valley District. So on page 6 of the presentation, specifically, if you look kind of in the center, there's a sliver where we abut North Whitehall, but then like there's the kind of a whole strip that's excluded. But then if you go down to page 10,
yeah, I think I know where you're getting with this. So this is direct from I'm going to actually go back to the land use plan.
Okay.
So the land use plan created in 2023 as part of the comprehensive plan identified, if you're able to see on the screen, I'm just going to, here, I'll just kind of hover around. This is a general area that we were considering for the Jordan Valley overlay. Specifically in the land use plan, this came from the 90% of that area being under the category of a Jordan Valley land use. The purple areas are the industrial land uses, which were identified around the existing industrial developments that we have, and still within roughly the industrial zoning areas that we have. These yellow spaces are what we call our rural residential areas. These are built out neighborhoods that we have existing development. So the idea there is a different land use goal than the Jordan Valley, because these are not undeveloped lands. These are developed spaces. So we establish a set of criteria under rural residential. Again, the concept of conservation subdivision is in all of those. This just gave us direction initially to identify the difference between developed residential neighborhoods, developed industrial areas, and undeveloped areas.
my concern is there's at least one property that's not within the green, yet it is undeveloped at the moment. And my question is, could that have the village residential overlay on top of it, even though it's not part of the overall Jordan Valley?
Yeah, so tonight is just the PERT district, which only covers the existing industrial zone. After we get through the PERT district, staff will be revisiting the Jordan Valley overlay. We'll probably make some announcements at future Board of Commissioners meetings at the status to that. So I encourage, if you want to participate in that more during the presentations on that, we can certainly look at the effects of that initial overlay into some of the detailed areas, but that's not part of the PERT. it was intended to be in that overall Jordan Valley. Right now we do have, at least in theory, we have requirements for what that Jordan Valley overlay would be, including 10 acres of undeveloped land for the residential, not necessarily the mixed residential.
I would just add, if you have additional questions on the Jordan Valley, happy to talk about them anytime. So just reach out.
I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you for your time.
Please come back as we debate the rest of the Jordan Valley overlay and the residential. Your insight would be invaluable. No, I'm serious. Please continue to be engaged on that.
And just to remind everyone, Commissioner Hodges mentioned earlier, please visit our township website. All of the information is posted for residents to be aware of upcoming meetings, projects the township is working on, announcements, events. It is the source of all the things that the township is working on, and we'd like you to be involved.
And I left some of my cards over there on the table by the agenda, and I believe the Jordan Valley Overlay Hub is still active with the comment box as well.
Fantastic. Next on the list is Michael Sellen. I hope I pronounced that. Selleck, thank you.
Doctor, I'm a cardiologist in the area, and
could you give us your address, please?
2816 Orfield Road, right in the back is where you want to put this fiasco. These data centers require vast resources on a massive level involving mechanical, electrical, and plumbing to support power generation, distribution equipment, substations, generators, storage tanks, heating, air conditioning, both ground and rooftop, which is commonly a bone of contention with neighbors. We know it's an environmental impact on the water supply, where most of us have 800-foot wells already, and sewage disposal and air quality. They do vast amounts of data storage, processing, transmission of data, of business data, with digital centers, AI computers, network systems, servers, routers, appliances, solar panels, and windmills are commonly with it. These data centers, most communities, like we said, do not have the power infrastructure to support these because they require extremely high energy consumption. Data centers are dangerous to the health and welfare of the community, just like the old Bell Labs story when they developed the transistor there in the 80s. You had brain cancer episodes all over. Noise pollution is a problem. There's always a constant hum and ground vibration from the servers and the fans, resulting in sleep disturbances, stress, headaches, hypertension, and hearing loss. There's air pollution resulting in respiratory illness because of the nitrogen dioxide produced by backup generators that also can impact climate change. Air quality is affected by the accumulation of dust particulate matter and volatile organic compounds. Many generators are diesel, some are gas turbine, which specifically put spikes in air pollution. Data centers emit non-ionizing electromagnetic fields. The AI computer processors produce low-level radiation, which poses increased risks, particularly, again, brain cancers and more susceptible to children. The chemical exposure also comes from the cooling and the cleaning agents used in these units. Workers in these facilities face risks such as electric shock from high voltage equipment, burns, fires, and fatalities due to the concentration of electrical components and heat generation equipment. There's intense heat caused by these servers when these cooling systems fail. Residents are impacted by the water supply depletion from the cooling systems, as well as probably the return water to the Jordan Creek, which will probably be polluted again, as it was with Trojan powder when they dumped their waste into there. So the code 53 PS 55101 in part says to preserve the character, community, and diversity of South Whitehall Township. Putting a data center here will not hold true to that statement. Just as the prior attempt to put an industrial park in the same property was a bad idea because of the traffic. And again, that plan was let go. Many of us are fed up with the board trying to amend the comprehensive plan. Such an endeavor needs to be built where it's supposed to be built, in remote areas, near major highways, not near residences, not near one of the best schools systems in the region. The proposed land can excellently, this particular land could well support $1 and $2 million home estates. Because a lot of these homes in the area are, they're big estates, and that's what probably should be used for that land, and put your data center someplace else, not near where the school systems are. This would be a most appropriate use of the land, especially in a housing shortage. It's evident from what we can see from the constituents in this room and all the signs being torn down, trying to post this meeting, that there's no support for this, and you'd be clearly going against the residents of the community.
Thank you. I'll ask Attorney Zader again. We hear your concerns. We share your concerns. We live in this community as well. From a township perspective, with our ability to place this land has been zoned industrial, and we're listening to comments that we understand are very serious and very concerning, saying we should put it somewhere else and build homes here instead. We've got a lot of moving parts that have been discussed by this last speaker. And
we do. I would just say this. Dr. Sillig understandably suggested that data centers go in remote areas away from homes and near highways. I don't think those kind of areas exist in South Whitehall Township. We're a quasi-urbanized area, and we are required by Pennsylvania law to allow data centers. So the question facing this Board of Commissioners is, where do they go? And the board is considering an ordinance tonight that decides where they go.
And by default, even if we didn't adopt this evening, we must provide for all uses. And if a data center plan came in tomorrow, it would go in this district because it's zoned industrial. Is that correct? And in South Whitehall, it is this district.
So they must go somewhere in South Whitehall, and the industrial zone is where they would belong.
Yeah, the for uses not provided for are permitted in the industrial zone via special exception. So there's a specific provision in our ordinance for uses that aren't provided for. So yes, it would go to the industrial zone.
I would just ask a further question of Solicitor Zader. Dr. Zellick made an argument that perhaps the township should rezone this property to rural residential. But from your perspective, in that interim period between potential rezoning, advertising, and the adoption of rezoning, what rights would the current landowner have to proceed under any sort of industrial plans? What are the risks?
Until an ordinance is adopted and becomes effective, any plan submitted by a developer, any special exception or conditional use submitted in connection with a future potential development has a vested right to continue once that submission has been made, as long as it's submitted prior to the adoption of an ordinance. So at this point in time, the property owner or owners of the land that is under consideration for this ordinance, they could come in with a plan to put in anything that's allowed now in the industrial district. And as Dave Manhart mentioned a moment ago, if there's a use that's not provided for under the ordinance, such as a data center, that could be submitted for a special exception approval in a situation where we don't have requirements and conditions to deal with a data center. That could happen tomorrow if this ordinance isn't adopted.
Does staff have any comments at this time?
I guess my comment is I'd look for an affirmative comment from Attorney Zader also in the municipality's planning code that if a zoning ordinance amendment were to be considered to say rezoning from the industrial zone to a residential zone, is it not true that that would also need to be justified in the comprehensive plan? I have up here the proposed land use plan from the comprehensive plan that shows this general area under the industrial and the Jordan Valley. So I don't know, even if the board were to consider a rezoning in this area, what the process would be to rezone that industrial zone to residential in context of the vision from the comprehensive plan.
The best way I can answer it is saying this then. Every ordinance that is adopted by the township, by any township, has to have a rational basis or is subject to challenge and subject to being declared as invalid. And South Whitehall Township very recently went through a lengthy process with public input to arrive at a comprehensive plan. So to turn around on the heels of a comprehensive plan that was just adopted with a great deal of staff time, commissioner time, hired consultants, and public input over the course of many months, if not a few years, and on a dime turn and then go in the opposite direction and zone differently than that comp plan, I think you could see how one could challenge whether there's a rational basis behind that kind of a decision.
Thank you.
So if we would rezone this residential, then we would still have to find a place for industrial based on having places in the township to meet the state law to have all uses accounted for.
Every municipality, as has been said multiple times, must provide for every use. The asterisk to that is you also have to provide for what is viewed as a fair share of each of those uses. And a fair share is going to differ from municipality to municipality. If you're looking at Lynn or Heidelberg Township, predominantly rural agricultural, what is a fair share for a commercial industrial use there is going to be very different than a municipality that has Route 22, I-78, Turnpike, and 309 running through it like we do here. And it's a judgment call. Reasonable minds can differ, but putting data centers on, let's just say, a 5-acre tract somewhere where you can say it's allowed there, it just isn't going to cut it in a South Whitehall Township.
There are no other comments. We'll move on to the next speaker, and that would be Paul North. We need to move on, sir. We have a 5-minute limit each. We have a whole list of people waiting to speak.
Good evening. I'm Paul North. I live at 3025 Victoria Lane, which is in the Mechanicsville area. And other than the good doctor, I believe I live closer to the proposed zone than anyone else who has spoken here tonight. I've been a township resident for almost 40 years and at that location for 17 years. Since the hour is late, I will be brief. I have 2 points to make. The first is a facts on the ground situation. Most of the parcel that's subject to the proposed PERT ordinance is owned by Jerris. And if you consider the piece that's bounded or that is east of Cedar Crest Boulevard, west of Mark Chunk Road, north of the railroad, and south of Orfield Road, there's an interesting thing that happened or didn't happen this summer. There were no farm crops planted on any of that land. Instead, there was excavation equipment and test drilling rigs there most of the summer. So something's going to happen to that land in the near future, whether we like it or not. The second point is, and this follows what has been discussed recently by some of the other speakers, I have 25 years of experience in the land development process, which includes 10 years as the assistant solicitor to the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission from 1990 to 2000. What we are engaged with now is what I call the race to the Board of Commissioners. It's what gets here first, either a land development application or an ordinance amendment. Tonight you have the ordinance amendment in front of you. You adopt it. Any subsequent developer, when they come in, will be subject to it. If you don't adopt it, then you're vulnerable to anybody who walks in here tomorrow or thereafter with a land development plan. A lot of valid comments have been made here tonight about suggestions that could be made to the ordinance to improve it. There's a process for that, an amendment process. I would encourage the board to adopt the ordinance as it is now presented and to ask the staff to take the comments tonight under consideration and then come back with some revisions and amendments to address those concerns that have been raised here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mateus Elijevich.
Hey, my name is Matias Elihovich. I live on Suncrest Drive, pretty much across the street from this area that we're discussing. I want to thank everyone for thinking about trying to protect the township. I agree with many of the speakers before me that I don't think that the conditions in the ordinance are sufficient to really protect us. I agree with the speakers who stated that there should be strict requirements on, how the water is obtained, how the water is used, how the water is disposed of, how the energy is obtained, how much of the energy that is used needs to be, renewable energy that, isn't, that we are not paying for, but that these facilities are paying for themselves, because basically they use a ton of energy. Like everyone said, it's going to raise the energy prices. These data centers can use up to 5 million gallons of water per day. This is this area is an area with wells. Like, we don't have municipal water, we don't have municipal sewer. So they have to be. They have to be accountable for the water that they use. They can't take it from us. Our wells will dry up. When they flush all their polluted water, it will go back into the water table where we're getting our water from, where the Jordan Creek is. So, these people have to account for how they're going to, use these resources. I know that they're supposed to provide a plan in advance that you guys will review, but who makes this plan? How do we know it's accurate? Who reviews the plan, or do we just take it at face value? They tell you they're going to use this much water. Do we know that that's right? Is anybody checking? Or are we just taking what they're saying and believing it because it's to their advantage to tell us what we want to hear? And they will. That's what they'll do. Also, I know that in the presentation earlier, it said that the zoning for the land in the area has originally made in 1960. Well, I know that we were saying earlier that changing the zoning of this land from industrial to residential would be difficult, but I encourage you to probably try to do that, because this industrial area isn't an area next to a school, next to residences, and next to farms. It's not an appropriate area for industrial use. And if you presented that, I think most people would agree. Like a previous speaker said, nobody here really supports this area to be industrial use area. And I think that just because it's industrial now and we have a plan where it's industrial now doesn't mean that we can't change it. It's like, sorry for the analogy, but I'm a chess player. It's like if you move your knight to the wrong place, that doesn't mean you can't move it back. I know that we've expended some difficulty, and some resources and effort for this comprehensive plan. And I thank the board for trying to protect the township. But, if this shouldn't be industrial, we can admit that maybe we should undo it and make it residential. This was made industrial, like when the land was first zoned many decades ago. It's not appropriate for it to be industrial now. So those are basically my comments. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you, sir. I do have a question for staff. The gentleman's question, how do we know a plan for water, et cetera, is accurate? Can you expound on the township's
Yes, so
plan for that?
we have a group of professional engineers, professional geologists that will review the impact statements. Additionally, if we come across something that we want specialized review for, we certainly have the opportunity to engage specific consultants for additional review. So if we weren't comfortable with the impact statement as reviewed by our utility engineer, for example, we could send it to a hydrogeologist and get additional level of review and scrutiny of those plans and those statements. It is certainly something that we are not going to let a developer come in and write whatever they want on there, and we're not going to rubber stamp anything. It's going to go through the review process of staff, professionals, and potentially even additional professionals.
Very good, thank you. The next speaker is Jim Lenahan.
My name's Jim Lenahan. I live at 2262 Albright Avenue. Most of the points that I was going to cover have already been made, but I do want to say I found a listing on the internet of proposed data centers in the state of Pennsylvania. And the one that I saw had a power demand of 960 megawatts. That is an incredible amount of power. And there are other comments on the internet that some of these data centers use such a high amount of power that it caused the residents' power bills to increase substantially. So that could be an effect in our area. And I don't know what role PP&L would play if they had a high power demand, whether they'd try to spread those costs around or try to put it on the data center. Would seem to be appropriate to put it on the data center. The other thing is a lot of comments about noise pollution on these data centers. And the comment you made about Harrisburg wanting to take over and usurp our ordinance, I saw this comment on the internet with this listing of data centers in Pennsylvania, that the government and state wants to have a lot of data centers in the state of Pennsylvania. And offering these incentives, tax breaks, regulatory exemptions, and waiver of environmental standards. The question is, if you have certain standards that you are applying here that are stricter than the state standards, which standards apply? Are we doing anything useful here?
I would defer to Attorney Zader and then I can follow up.
There are a few things I can mention, sir. First of all, stepping back a moment from your question and giving a generalization so you have an appreciation for the playing field. At the federal level, at the state level, there are governments of general jurisdiction. As long as it's not unconstitutional, they can enact legislation to do what the legislators see fit.
Mm-hmm.
Local government, like South Whitehall Township, doesn't operate that way. Locally, we can only legislate in accordance with the powers the state legislature has given to the township.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what goes on out there in the regulatory world and the statutory world is preempted by state law or federal law, and the township can have nothing to say about it. So for example, well, I'm not an expert on how everything works with electricity and PPL and Talon and MedEd and the PUC. It is an area that is preempted, meaning it's at state level where it's regulated, and the township cannot regulate what PPL does or doesn't do in terms of giving electricity to a data center or to a warehouse or to a housing development. That's not something we can address. That's addressed through state regulation. And similarly, someone earlier had mentioned, what about the forever chemicals like PFAS? I'm very familiar with that. We can't regulate it at our level. That's something that's at the state level or the federal level. So a lot is preempted. And so the concerns raised by residents tonight, all understandable. And I think the board perhaps has expressed a willingness to work with residents on tweaking the ordinance over the course of time. But we can't address everything that's been talked about tonight because it's oftentimes preempted.
And I would add, thank you for that, and would certainly encourage all residents to contact your state legislatures. A lot of this pressure for data centers is coming from the state level. Our state representatives need to hear from you. They're the ones that are potentially giving these tax incentives, tax breaks, incentives to build. We know that it's happening. We've heard about it. We've read about it. Staff is aware of it. But to Attorney Zader's point, our hands are tied if the decision is made at the state level. It removes our ability to enact legislation locally to protect in those areas.
I would just build off of what Commissioner Kelly said, and then Mr. Lenihan brought up a great point that with respect to data centers, the Commonwealth's concerns are primarily centered around the lessening of regulations and the lessening of environmental considerations. The township is run completely in the opposite direction. Our primary concerns are the tightening of regulations and the tightening of environmental concerns. But like Commissioner Kelly said, the only way to stop the state from preempting our ability to regulate data centers is to call your state legislators. It seems like every year, every legislative session, there are new attempts by the General Assembly to take powers away from municipalities. I know in the past I've called Representative Schlossberg and Senator Coleman and Senator Miller before and told them in more uncertain terms to knock it off and let municipalities control themselves. But each time these things come up, we all have to do that. So I would encourage residents to do the same and keep control of land use decisions local. We live here. We have to endure the environmental impacts. People in Harrisburg don't, so they shouldn't be in charge of that, in my opinion.
Something I'd like to add to that comment is this. On occasion, when the state decides to preempt an activity of local government, they will grandfather municipalities who have already acted and legislated. And it'll just affect future enactments or enactments for the first time by other municipalities. No idea if this legislation that Commissioner Kelly first brought up would fit into that kind of mold eventually or not, but certainly by enacting a zoning ordinance that deals with data centers in the way the township proposed ordinance does, we at least have that possibility. If we do nothing, we don't have that possibility.
Thank you, Attorney Zader. Just realizing it is getting late, I'm going to continue on this list, but please, if the comment has already been discussed, if you could keep your comments brief and please share with us. I still need to open the floor to those who have not signed up on this list, and we do have people online who want to speak as well. So I'm going to allow everyone an opportunity. Next on the list is Katie Clement. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Katie Clement, and I live at 2748 Suncrest Drive. Many of my comments have been addressed, so I'm going to try to breeze through them and cut some of them out since they've been talked about. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your proactiveness in the PERT overlay district, and I do support it at this time. I especially like the setbacks and the pedestrian routes, and I think there are great steps to balance growth and our community's character per the comprehensive plan. But I would like to ask, why limit the PERT overlay to just data centers? Is it possible to extend those restrictions and have similar rules like noise limits, buffers, and pedestrian paths to the entire industrial zone near Mauchunk and Cedar Crest? Also, it was mentioned before whether or not this area could be rezoned, and it was specifically suggested residential, but I'd also like to propose considering rezoning it to agriculture, or at least, or even consider open space per the plans, for the current plans, like suggestions for making more open space available in our area. I believe this entire area has been historically farmland, and in the 1970s or 80s is when it was rezoned industrial. So just going back to what it was previously. And I would like to say South Whitehall does have industrial zones in areas outside of this current area, even though this is like the one that we're currently discussing. But could these PERT plans also be extended to those other areas protecting citizens who are near those industrial zones? And then also, I'm not familiar what's in those zones, but are there abandoned buildings or malls or anything in that area that could use like a boost and instead be used as data centers with all of the PERT overlays, just making that area more appealing in general without having to move into farmland and create, take away those hardwoods that we were talking about in open spaces. And then also, I'm concerned about the current definition of a data center. Is it possible that this definition becomes outdated and weakens or nullifies the overlay? Would the council be able to modify that definition going forward in case data centers, the definition of that changes over time as AI continues to grow? And then also, I do live next to this area, and as mentioned from a previous speaker, there was a lot of recent activity in this area, and I wasn't sure if maybe the township was doing any of the drilling, because the previous resident is right, there was no farming going on in that area. I don't know if anybody has any updates on what's going on in there, if any proposals have been put forward to the council for land development as to why they might have been drilling or perk testing in that area. And at a previous meeting a long time ago, the owners of that land proposed dividing that area into 60 industrial lots with an intersection at the high school and at Suncrest Drive. And I don't know if there's been any movement forward with that, but there were a lot of concerns then, and there's a lot of concerns still as to whether that is the current proposed idea of this land developer, if they've updated it. And so if you have anything that you can share with us, I'd really appreciate it. But I really appreciate you prioritizing smart growth. And I think that the PERT overlay that you've suggested so far is a good idea, and that you continue to take considerations and maybe modify. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'll ask Tom if you've got any information we can share about any PERT testing. Was the township involved in that?
Yeah, I think I can try to answer most of the questions, if not all of them. So, first of all, our comprehensive plan encourages us to look at zoning in accordance with the comprehensive plan land uses. So your comments about extending additional overlays, looking at adaptive reuse, things of those nature, that is something that we will undergo on a continuous basis in accordance with the comp plan as part of the implementation of said comp plan. In terms of the landowner, we have not received any land development applications filed formally at the township, so there's nothing under review. And secondly, for the drilling work that was discussed, I mean, the landowner, any landowner in South Whitehall Township has the right to conduct exploratory geotechnical investigations or work associated with stormwater or sewage percolation. Those are things that anyone could do at any time across the township.
I would
Thank you.
just add to the comment about looking at definitions and things that might change. In addition to comprehensive planning, part of what we developed coming out of that was a re-examination report. And that re-examination report is conducted annually. There are questions in there that ask and hopefully bring forward additional thought or comment from the boards reviewing those or providing answers as to, has anything changed in the landscape or the environment or technology that have made changes that would require us to adopt or change, adapt our ordinances to. So I think we, and the board was very insightful in kind of pushing this forward. We're looking at it every year. So if things come up and things change, we certainly would build that into the reexamination report process, and then it would trigger additional updates.
Very good, thank you. Next on the list is Brandon, is it Duder? I said that right, yes?
All right, good evening. I think it's still evening. It's Brandon Duda from 4010 Lois Lane. All right, so the first thing I have is, have any of the other surrounding communities adopted one of these kind of overlays, or are we kind of the first kind of trailblazer here?
Upper Macungie has a proposed ordinance. I'm not sure if they adopted it, but I don't believe they did. And there's not many right now because we're actually on the forefront of trying to be proactive.
Okay. Yeah. So that was my curiosity to see if we did, was there interaction with them, or?
I'll add to that as well. I had the opportunity, I looked through some of the other ordinances and proposed. I believe there's one in Northampton County, either Palmer or Forks Township. I did look at the ordinances today. They proposed ordinances, but none of the proposed ordinances go as far as South Whitehall's. They tend, I believe the one in Palmer or Forks, the maximum height on their data centers is 70 feet, doesn't have the strict buffering requirements, setbacks. So yes, there are other ordinances. I think what we tried to do as a township is go a lot further in our protections than other municipalities.
And I can speak to Upper Macungie. 2 weeks ago at their meeting, they introduced discussion to begin to look at an ordinance for this. So they're at the infancy stage of beginning to draft.
But we've looked around. We're not just kind of just like.
And I'll ask staff to please.
Yeah, we've done extensive research to the point that we can on this because it's very new. Dave and I actually just attended the Pennsylvania American Planning Association conference this week. This is a hot topic for every municipality across the Commonwealth. As far as what is available, I think everybody is struggling to put their best foot forward with this. It's hard to go through the adoption process. There's a legal requirement with noticing and so forth. So I hope that for the sake of the Commonwealth, we see a lot more right behind us. I will say I participated in a webinar with the Pennsylvania Municipal League maybe a month or so ago that talked about municipalities that have gone through this with data center interest, some with ordinances adopted, some talking about their approach only through conditional use, some municipalities only through an overlay, some municipalities in the process of adopting an ordinance, and some municipalities without anything at all. All of them have said the most important thing you can do is have something in place. And I would say I'm proud of our approach to having that balance of conditional use and the overlay, hoping that it covers as much as we can as far as the addressing the potential interest, whether that be someone who understands the path that they can go forward with agreeing to the conditions that we placed, or through the conditional use process still with this as a guidance.
Okay. So another thing that I have is what's kind of defined as tech use? Like it just says technology overlay. So what is really saying tech? Because we talk about future proofing and looking at anything going forward. Is it actually codified in there? I couldn't really.
So the uses themselves are codified with definitions. I mean, as far as the name of the overlay, it doesn't really matter. I think all of our other overlays are innovation districts.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so this just applies to in the Jordan Creek, that industrial zone, not the South Industrial Zone.
Correct.
It's only, okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. It's only what's in, so for power generation and backup generators and that stuff, it's in the ancillary equipment, it's only what's specified there. So I know we're talking once again, future proofing, and we're getting down to modular reactors years down the road, but we'll get there if somebody's got that on their site. It wouldn't be allowed unless it had to be changed.
So, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we talked about power generation is allowed in every district to an extent. The intentional addition of those accessory uses of, I'll say, alternative energy sources is to encourage that as something that can be applied on site to support, whether that be a data center. But I'll be honest, just as a few people have mentioned, the power usage is very high. But in addition to, especially for backup generation and for some of the potential complementary uses that we are encouraging there.
That's good. Oh, sorry, I apologize. More thing. And then one of the things there was in the setbacks and the buffer zones. So what was the thought, the idea with the berms? So you got your 15-foot berm, you're 6 foot high, so you're 21 foot. Is that just a visual break, or are you trying to get some sound?
Primarily a visual break, but there are sound benefits to having a berm and vegetation.
Okay. So I don't know.
So hopefully it's a two-prong protection.
But it's more visual than
primarily visual, yes.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, everybody, for your
Thank you
time.
for your
Appreciate
comments.
the effort.
Sure. You know what, if I can just add for you, Upper Macungie is due to adopt in December. That's their projected timeline to adopt. So they're going through the process right now. And also there is a data center at 9999 Hamilton Boulevard. I believe it was an old AT&T building. There is a data center there. So if you want to do a drive-by and check in, I don't know what the specifications are. It's not my township, but I do know it's there. It's older, it's smaller, but just so you know, there is one in the area.
Okay, next on the list is Don Holden.
Good evening. I guess by your definition, somebody could buy all the lots and put a small nuclear power plant in there.
Could you give us your address, please, sir?
Could that happen?
Could you give your name and address for the record, please?
What's that?
Name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Don Holden, 1909 Walbert Avenue, Allentown. But I'm actually South Whitehall resident, 50 years. Anyway, could somebody put a small nuclear power plant in there? If they bought up all the lots?
You would have to ask.
I mean, because you said you can't discriminate any.
So
I know it's far-fetched.
Yeah, federal regulations and all that, but the underlying MPC you have to provide for every use, it would be power generation facility. If it's not provided for specifically, it falls into that special exception category, which would then fall under the industrial zone.
Okay. One more quick thing. I mean, a couple more quick things. I heard that over on Houseman Road, there's rumors about a thing going in there. I'm not sure.
No,
that is a room filled of servers serving the businesses that are on that site. That's 3,200 square feet of server space. That's not an industrial data center.
Okay.
In any way, shape, or form.
Okay. One of the biggest problems I've read about with the data centers is the vast amount of water and electric they use. Now, if we, instead of going through the legal things you've been going, if we changed the building codes and said that the amount of water you project to use, you have to have that size pipe that goes all the way back to the power source, to the water source. And same thing with electric. You know, you're going to use a lot of electric. Does your electric have to go all the way back to a substation? It will add a lot of costs, and it might. That's building codes. That's not.
So I'll answer your question right away. Yeah. South Whitehall Township, under the Uniform Construction Code, is not permitted to change the building code in the manner you're suggesting without going through a process with the state. So we would have to justify from a technical nature, hire experts. Right. It's not an easy process at all.
The problem
We're preempted by the state.
The problem is that they use so much water that our pressure goes down. So that affects the whole area. That could be I'm just giving you straws to grasp at.
Yeah, the better path there would be to have the state amend the Uniform Construction Code and the building code. It wouldn't be for South Whitehall to amend it.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
That would be the path.
Yeah. My one other question is where the Trojan powder has been for decades and decades and decades, and then the other plant. And there was a dump on that site too. We used to do work for Bronstein, and whatever junk we had, we used to dump on the thing. The entryway is right across the street from the high school. Anyway, would that all be cleaned up to protect the future businesses there from all the? Is there anyone thought of that or?
Well, I think the property. This doesn't pertain to the Geo property, the Trojan powder property that you're talking about.
Okay.
This is north of their property. So whoever develops the Geo Trojan powder property then has to go through and do all the hazard mitigation that you're referring to.
Okay. But lastly, think about the size pipe that you need for the amount of water you need. Because it's, if anything, it would take away us not having the water we need and the electric we need. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to online at this point, and then I'll open it up if there's anyone else here who hasn't spoken in the meeting room. At this time, if there's anyone online with a public comment.
Yeah, there's two online. The first is Carol Jepson, 2729 Suncrest Drive. Carol, if you could unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Hi. Again, I appreciate you taking into consideration what is upcoming and where we are going with respect to the data centers. Obviously, my concern, I'm two houses removed from Cedar Crest Boulevard. I'm right behind Parkland High School. So obviously the noise is my biggest concern. I know that the low frequency travels a lot farther than high frequency noises, and studies have shown that up to 600 feet sound is loud enough to interfere with sleep, daily activities, and up to a quarter mile, it's significant enough to, because we don't have a lot of hills or dense vegetation in our area that to absorb the sound. It would also affect people on Suncrest Drive, Fallow, and Pleasant Hills. The 350-foot setback, I don't think would address these concerns enough, even taking into account the 50-foot buffer zone from the proposed nature path. Obviously, it's a concern to us in the neighborhood. Exposure to these sounds, even though it's at low decibels, and I understand that it's at the frequency of people speaking at a conversational level, but that would be a 24/7 conversational level, and with noise that would literally be nonstop, which obviously is linked to health problems, hypertension, sleep disturbances, etc. And I also understand that there's going to be repercussions if these noise levels go above that, but what good are punishments once that problem is already in place? I think that is our biggest concern. Those aren't going to help the people who are living in this immediate area. So when you are determining what goes into this area, I strongly urge you to consider the people living here and stick to the plan that you have set in place, making it a residential and mixed-use community plan. I feel like that would be the best option, especially at the high school, with our students here as well as our community here.
Thank you for your comments, Carol.
Thank you, Carol. I'm happy to just make a quick comment. So without the research on the direct sort of control on the low hum that you mentioned, one of the things that we've added as part of the pre-construction noise study and in the ordinance itself, we have defined different types of noise, including continuous noise, intermittent noise, impulsive noise, and low frequency noise, which you referenced. One of the requirements of that pre-construction noise study is to address not only those sensitive areas, including your neighborhood there of a residential area, but also to specifically define what the potential noise impacts could be and mitigation strategies to ensure that those noises of all those different categories are not affecting those sensitive areas. So similar to the community environmental impact statements, this is a requirement up front and something that staff and the community and the public can bring up in review of that noise study and ask questions directly of a developer who will need to provide a certified noise expert to prepare that. And the township can also just consider what other expertise and research we need to identify in reviewing that noise study as well.
Thank you, Chris. Is there one other caller online?
Yeah, the next person is BJ Ratliff from 2824 Suncrest Drive. BJ, if you could unmute.
Yep, no problem.
We can hear you.
All right. I will try to be quick. As a neighbor to Carol and Katie, I want to reiterate a little bit about the sound, but only in the effect that ANSI actually recommends a 35 decibel external noise, including road traffic. And being there by the school, I don't understand why we're giving them an extra 30 decibels. So that's actually the American National Standards Institute for background noise near school. So, I mean, I think putting something more strict in place rather than doing buffers is probably more important. Though I love the buffers idea; those are great. The lot directly across from us is the one I'm more concerned about, though everybody in the township deserves to be heard. That lot, I don't know how big it is, but I'm wondering how many of these units could even move in there. And do we have any regulations that would say there can only be one?
Are you referring to the lot with the old barn on the west side of Cedar Crest, just north of the intersection with Suncrest?
I'm across from the high school, so I'm referring to the lot by the high school.
South of the high school? On what road?
I'm on Suncrest. I'm right behind the baseball field.
Right, but what lot are you referring to?
The Jarvis lot on the side of Cedar Crest.
Below Ritter Road.
I'm sorry, I should know where Ritter Road is, but it's above the creek, across from the high school.
So yeah, the lot along Ritter Road between the railroad tracks and the high school is what you're referring to.
I'm gonna go with yes. There's a stoplight right by the high school. It's the only stoplight. It's that lot that I'm referring to.
Ma'am, are you referring to the lot that's adjacent to the properties on Suncrest before you get up to the Orfield Road intersection?
No, I'm referring to the giant lot across from the stoplight.
Okay, that's the lot we're talking about. All right.
Yes, all of that land. How many buildings could they put in there that are data centers? And are we restricting it or regulating how many could move in? Because you're only saying they have to be a certain size. So I'm asking, could that lot, that all of those lots, however they sell them, I don't know if it's one lot or if it's 60, how many data centers could actually fit there? And do we have regulation that's going to limit how many can move into that land?
So those regulations are not explicit as to the number of buildings, but more in the dimensional requirements. So they would need to meet those dimensional requirements, and sort of by default that defines. We haven't done necessarily a build out in sense to that because each site is going to be specific. I know that area certainly has some topography changes, and access is certainly something that's going to be considered. So I guess the short answer to your question is we don't know how many could go there, but through the dimensional regulations, that kind of dictates what it could be.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to move on to the sound question unless you had a follow-up.
Well, I do. I wondered how many, if that land can be subdivided still, or if the way it's laid out is permanent.
It can be subdivided, yes, and have to meet the current standards under the zoning ordinance of the SALDO.
I have a quick question for Chris, because she raises a good point. Regardless of the number of data centers on that property, it would all be subject to the noise requirements, the buffering requirements, the environmental impacts, like regardless of the number, all the protections, you know, the restrictions don't lessen as the number of data centers go up.
Certainly not.
In fact,
no.
they probably
it becomes a lot more
becomes
difficult.
a lot harder. The more data centers you add, the more you have to comply with increasingly strict buffering, et cetera.
By design, it's self-limiting in that manner.
By design. Same limits. It's not really any different. They just have to first to the ball field is who's going to get the best pick. But the ANSI sound, I would really like you to consider that.
Yeah, I can handle that one. That's for inside the classroom. I looked up the regulation you referenced. That's inside the actual classroom.
No, inside is 12.
No, it says 30. I'm looking at it. It says 35 decibels for inside the core classroom.
Right. So that includes noise sources like traffic, playground noise, and building systems. So
right,
I mean, you won't be able to judge that once you let them cross that 57 to 68 mark. So like without knowing how loud those generators could be.
Which is why we're handling this through the sound criteria.
So they would need to provide the first
57 to 68, right?
The first step before anything regarding the noise is for the existing property in the condition that it is today as a farm field. They would need to take measurements around the property line for us to have that baseline. So whether the ANSI standard is 30 something, or if the preferred standard is around that, they would need to demonstrate that as far as what's existing there now, from the impacts from road traffic along Cedar Crest and Mock Chunk and Orfield Road to the existing operations, which are lessening at the geochemical plant to the school. So we have the explicit criteria as to what's the average sound across the 24-hour period at those property lines, so that we can start with an agreed upon baseline, and then they would use that to model how they direct any development there to ensure that they do not go over our objective standards or direct noise towards sensitive areas.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I think it's a great place to start. I was just saying, like, being a school and gonna house our children for the next, I don't even know how many hundreds of years, but it should be not a problem. They shouldn't have to hear the background noise of generators or the building. And I think wall standard is like 50 decibels. So, I mean, I would just ask that you be certain that they're not going to hear it in their classrooms. I mean, that's at minimum, that's important for the kids.
Very, very good. Thank you for your comment.
I do have two more. I'll be quick. So the umbrella policy for the codes and buffers, I think you should put it out there for anything that wants to move into these industrial areas, not just data centers or tech sites. So I agree with that one. And then I'd also like to ask about smart site. Maybe you could consider something like that. Enclosed generators and stuff can be built, and that would actually help on both fronts that I talked about. So
Very good. Thank you for your comment this evening. Is there anyone else online? There is not. So is there anyone else present who has a comment other than what we've heard tonight? Just sure. Of course, if you please give us your.
My name is Dwight Adam. I live at 2648 Willow Street. Chris, I'll ask you direct. In your research, have you done any study or have you seen any study that says, okay, at property line 57 dBs, another 100 yards out, another 200 yards out, what is it drop to?
So sound is tough. What we found was distance is really something that helps dissipate. That really reinforced us trying to encourage as large of setbacks as we could, those 350 feet. It's a very difficult measurement to identify how, because it's the topography can play into it, vegetation can play into it, what is generating that sound can play into it. So how sound moves can kind of be like the wind, essentially. So that's where we tried to put as clear restrictions as we could with the information we had available.
Okay. I just wanted to, curious if that was a consideration. With the natural resource use and the energy use, okay, they'll come to you with a plan and say, we anticipate whatever gallons a day. I don't even have a clue as to what to guess. Who's regulating that? Once they get it approved, after they said, you know, we're using 500,000 gallons a day, who's regulating it that they're not going to 1 million gallons?
It depends. If it is a township source, township controls it, township bills, township looks at the usage. That's monitored. We have SCADA systems that continually monitor water usage. The other side of that is DEP's on board, and they're looking at everything. Depending on what the draw is, DRBC gets involved. So there's multiple levels of eyes and regulations and jurisdictions involved with any draw of water.
We can't take comments from the audience. It has to be one person at a time. So if you please allow this gentleman to finish.
That's basically all my curiosities that weren't answered numerous times. And I do commend you for being proactive on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so.
Did you have a comment, sir?
He already.
Oh, I thought it was the guy in the tan, sorry.
Sorry, Matthias Elihovich, Suncrest Drive. My question was about, like, you guys are talking about who monitors the usage, and we appreciate that. But my question is, what's the recourse for when they go over their allotment? Like, monitoring is great, but when they continually go over their allotment, what do we do? Can we shut their water off? What, you know, like, how do you deal with that?
If they take water from the township, we have every right to monitor that. We have a meter that will go in that we can break down monthly, daily, hourly.
Sure.
So we can read all that, and we would have the right to make them abide to the amount of gallonage that we allotted them, and they would have to supplement that use. We would have the right to turn the water off if they go over without going through the proper channels of requesting more water that we could either determine we have or determine we don't have.
I see. Thank you. And thanks to all of you guys. I would just reiterate that I think we should just make the requirements as stringent as we can. Like, you know, BJ asked about the decibel level, and people asked about specifically, you know, stating how much water they can use, stating how much of the energy that they use they have to make on their own, that kind of stuff. I think we should make those requirements as stringent as possible.
Thank you. Of course. So at this time, Attorney Zader, we have no more comments. Do you have any closing comments for the board?
I would just say it's been a very full hearing. And at this point, given that
the public, we have Attorney Zader speaking. Could you please be respectful?
Given that the legal requirements have been met and the public has had an opportunity to comment, I will close this public hearing and turn it back to our board president.
Thank you, Attorney Zader. I want to thank the public, both in person and online, for all of your comments this evening. I think one of the strengths of local government is we are, as your representatives, are also your neighbors, and we live here. And every comment that was shared and voiced tonight are the same concerns that all of us have for ourselves, for our family and friends who live in this township. So thank you. We value and are equally concerned with clean air, water, safe, healthy community. And at the same time, we are cognizant of the laws in front of us that guide us, that put parameters around what we are and are not allowed to do. I appreciate every comment that was taken tonight. I know staff has documented them as well as the commissioners, and will continue to review as we look to serve our community in the best way possible on this particular issue. I do appreciate Attorney Zader laying out legally options specifically if we were to not vote on this tonight, not adopt it tomorrow, a land development could come in and we are unprotected. And thank you for guiding the board to explain that a future amendment could start tomorrow if there are issues that were brought up tonight that the board felt strongly needed to also be included. We have a lot of options to discuss this evening, but your legal guidance was very helpful. And I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I'm going to open up to the board for other comments at this point before I make any closing comments.
Yeah, I have a few comments. First, as I mentioned before, I want to thank all the residents who came out. I hope that we were able to answer your questions. I know that we and staff certainly learned a lot from you, and that, you know, rest be assured that all of your concerns and considerations will be taken into account and will certainly guide this board and staff as we move forward, be that through the ordinance, amendments to the ordinance, the land development process, other policies and procedures, all of the many, many tools that the township has at its disposal to regulate land usage. So I want to thank all of you for your contributions. We appreciate them more than we can describe. I'll just say in closing my remarks, I think what Mr. North said earlier is particularly on point. That it's a race now to see what the township can do to protect against data centers. So I personally am in favor of adopting the ordinance with the protections we've built in. I am definitely in favor of taking all the concerns into consideration tonight and having them guide how we proceed and where the best place to work in all those concerns are, and they will be addressed should a data center come to South Whitehall Township. It's the best that this board can do is to enact the ordinance and continue working on providing these protections. And all of your concerns, I hope that any data center that comes here will be able to address them, and we won't see the negative effects on water, on pollution, on noise, and et cetera. There's one thing I do know is that if we don't take this proactive measure tonight and a plan comes in tomorrow, all of your concerns are almost certain to come to fruition. And that is not a place that I'd feel comfortable putting the township in. So your concerns are absolutely legitimate, and they will guide our discussions going forward. And I would absolutely be in favor of taking this step, not the last step, just the first step in hopefully many steps to addressing this problem. And again, I would encourage our neighboring municipalities to do the same. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to preface our vote by just, again, bringing home this urgent nature. It's something we really have much of a choice in. And you know what? I sat there where you are, and I remember hearing this through other land use projects, and I hated hearing our hands are tied. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if we're not proactive with this, it will happen. It will potentially come directly from Harrisburg. They will override all our local zoning, and it will be placed right there. And we have no say at all. If in an industrial zone now, remember that we could get uses that generate truck traffic and create more congestion and tractor trailer traffic on the road, fumes, noise as well. I'm not saying that to dismiss anything, but as it is now, there are also risks with that. And if we change zoning, by the time we go through that entire process, something can land here. Again, we have no protection, so.
Yeah, thank you all for coming on. Thank you for your comments and announcement coming on us to whatever comes in there to hold them accountable and the staff accountable to make sure they're holding them to the fire, so to speak. I am concerned that something's coming. They didn't plant crops, which means they didn't get income from renting their property. They're up there drilling. Something's coming. This ordinance protects us as best it can so that whatever comes in there, our resident concerns are addressed. Hopefully it's not a data center, but if it is, we did everything we legally could to retain the character of our township. So I would be in favor of this. I don't think they're not going to wait forever to put something on their land. And we need to put something in place to protect the township and the residents.
Thank you, Commissioner Peischel. Commissioner Johns.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and you all had good comments and input. I'd like to thank our staff, and I agree with Jacob and Mr. North and the rest of the commissioners. I support this as of today.
Thank you all, commissioners. Before I call for the vote, I echo the comments of my fellow commissioners and of all the residents, both here and online. I, at this point, feel we would be vulnerable if we didn't adopt the protections that this township has built in to keep us safe. And I agree with Mr. North's comment. It is a race to the board. And what we have before us tonight is a layer of protection that we can stand on. And as I said earlier, tomorrow we can talk with staff, review the comments that were made, and is there a path forward to begin building in additional layers based on the comments that were heard tonight, which were excellent. The feedback from the community is always so valuable to us. That is my comment at this point in the meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt the ordinance? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. Moving on to agenda item 8A, we have a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, authorizing certain identified parcels to execute a Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection sewage facilities planning module application submitted for the Parkland School District, Parkland High School expansion number 2024-103. And Herb, Director of Operations, would you please present?
Thank you. Parkland High School, located at 2700 North Cedar Crest Boulevard, is proposing to upgrade their private wastewater treatment plant to address previous compliance issues, as well as increasing the hydraulic and organic capacity to serve the high school's planned expansion. The current capacity is 32,400 gallons per day. The proposed modification will increase the capacity to 55,000 gallons per day average, with a peak hydraulic design of 82,500 gallons per day. Since this project does not connect to the South Whitehall Township sewer, no allocation is required. Public Works is requesting a resolution approving the modification to the existing private wastewater treatment plant to satisfy the DEP requirements on their checklist.
Thank you, Herb. Does the board have any comments or questions?
I will just start by saying that I will, due to a conflict of interest with the district and their council, I will recuse myself from any discussion or decision on this matter.
Very good, Commissioner Ross, so noted.
So their capacity is an average. Is that for the 365-day average or just during school years?
I believe that is for the school year. I could be wrong on that.
Because my recent history on the authority was they had issues with their capacity because it was under capacity, because their average they used was for the year, obviously from July and August and half of June, nobody's there basically, right? So that brings their average down. So they had to make it smaller than what their actual capacity is during the school year, which caused problems. So my concern with this is, when did they take what are they using as their average? And what is I would like to see what their peak is during school years when there's in class right now versus their proposed expansion. And then what is it going to be beyond that?
Chris, I got some numbers for you if that helps.
Oh, sure.
No problem. Okay, so their present flows, their average is 36,000 gallons per day with a peak of 40.
Okay, so if the average is over 365 days a year, that's skewed.
Oh, I know what you're saying, because you're saying for 10 months, you're probably high. And then for 2 months.
Well, 10, yeah. And then the weekends, no one's there. Yeah. So that's my concern is, what is that average? What are they using to find their average capacity is my question.
And that's been vetted with DEP. And I can tell you that they definitely have jumped their peak. So to increase the size. So they're going from 36 to 55 on an average, but for peaks they're going to from 40 to 82. So they doubled it. So they redid their numbers. And again, that was with DEP. DEP does have factors for schools. So I think that was all hopefully relooked at. I can say those numbers were agreed upon with the state.
So the school district would have had to work with the DEP.
Correct.
To arrive at
this is
the capacity that they're requesting.
Correct. That is correct. And that is what's filled out by them and what DEP. We're just filling out the portion that we know what's happening. It doesn't affect South Whitehall Township at all because it's not connecting to our sewer system.
It's a private system.
Correct.
That work's already been done, right?
They have a plan down south of their building, but now they're expanding it because they currently have a plan and working through the system to expand the high school. So they're adding on to the plant.
Do they take into consideration all the activity on the fields and all that?
Oh yeah, they have to factor everything. So I mean, it's not just a school. You got the gymnasium, you got all the crazy soccer parents during the meet. So all those individual pieces and all the bathrooms and all the facilities all flow that way. They're all added into it.
Any other comments?
I do have a quick comment. Actually, it's a question, Herb. It's more like an environmental question. I noticed that on the project info number 10, page 4 of 14, there seems to be a need for trees to be cut down and cleared. Are they going to be replaced at all surrounding that perimeter? Or once they're gone, are they gone? Is there any kind of plan to replace those trees?
I think in general, when they're gone, they're gone. We will certainly add that to when we review the land development plan. We can certainly look into that. I can review the plan. If you want to give a call, I can get that answer for you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Is there any? Can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
What's your question? Monica?
Sorry, there needs to be trees cleared and cut down for the work that they're doing.
Well, I know when they built that school, they were supposed to put trees in and they went to the shade commission and didn't do it.
That's something that would be addressed in land development.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those are land development issues, and we can sit down and review the plans.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. No other board comments? Is there public comment on this agenda item? Anyone online with a comment? At this time, do I have a motion to adopt said resolution?
As long as the DEP, these are DEP approved, like it went to the state.
Yep, it does. All those small flow treatments are out of the jurisdiction of the townships. DEP regulates all those.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We have motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. Agenda item 8B, we have a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of South Whitehall, Lehigh County, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, approving the settlement stipulation in the matter of Parkland School District versus 4570 Broadway LLC, 2024-C-3925. Tom, if you'd please present.
Thank you. So on July 30th, 2024, Parkland School District filed an assessment appeal. So in other words, they initiated the appeal with the Lehigh County Board of Assessment Appeals regarding the property of 4575-4581 Broadway, Allentown. So following hearings and subsequent appeal proceedings, so the parties have entered in a settlement stipulation approved by the Court of Common Pleas of Lehigh County. So part of this settlement, the taxable assessed value of the property is actually going up. So effective January 1st, 2025 and July 1st, 2025 for the school district. So January 1st, it's with the township and the county. So this assessment increased from $623,500 to $931,000 based on a fair market value of $1.75 million and a common level ratio of 53.2%. And then effective January 1st, 26 for the township and the county, and then July 1st, 26 for the school district. The assessment adjusted from $931,000 to $864,500. So again, that's also above the $623,500. So that will remain in subsequent years, the 864,500 number. So I'd ask for a resolution to approve the settlement stipulation.
Thank you, Tom. Does the board have any comments or questions? Is there any public comment? Anyone online? I need a motion to adopt said resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Agenda item 8C, we have a resolution extending a conditional offer of employment for entry-level position of patrol officer in the Township's Police Department to applicant number 09537, conditioned on the individual satisfactorily completing the medical and psychological examination to confirm their fitness for duty. Chief Lombardo, if you'd please present.
Good evening, Commissioners. So on August 16th, 2025, the Police Department conducted civil service testing for entry-level police officer through the Lehigh County Consortium of Police Chiefs. Physical fitness and written portions were completed here at Parkland High School. Following the physical fitness and written exam testing, in accordance with civil service rules, oral interviews were conducted with the top 25 candidates. Following the interviews, an eligibility list of 12 candidates was compiled, and the top four now candidates have passed polygraph and background checks, thereby ensuring that the township does not proceed with candidates that have not passed key integrity and qualification checks. So the police department is respectfully requesting that the Board of Commissioners extend a conditional offer of employment for entry-level police officer in the South Whitehall Township Police Department to applicant number 9537, conditioned upon successful completion of medical and psychological testing.
Thank you, Chief. Does this hiring, if it's approved this evening, bring the department to full complement of officers?
Correct. This will be the last one. We'll be at full staff after she comes aboard.
That's fantastic. I want to extend our thanks to you and the recruitment team. I know you've done a lot of work this year to bring us to this point, and we're very pleased, and we wish this applicant the best as they move forward through the examination for medical and psychological.
Yeah, thank you. Even our people that we recruited are now recruiting other people that we just onboarded. So that's second generation. So they did a good job.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Chief. Does the board have any comments or questions?
I would just add, Chief, please pass along my thanks to the recruitment team, to the officers who have really shown great initiative in looking to recruit their future colleagues and putting together marketing materials and going to various schools. Nobody knows this department better than the men and women downstairs. So the fact that they're able to share their perspectives, I credit the success we've had in recruitment over the past few months, largely to their efforts. So please pass along my greatest thanks to them.
Yeah, they poured their hearts into it. I asked one of them, why are you guys doing this? And they said, we just can't fail. We have to do this. So they care a lot. So I'm very proud of them for that.
So grateful. Thank you. Any other comments? Is there any public comment? Any online? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt said resolution?
So moved.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We have no motions. Correspondence and information. Tom, if you'd review boards and commissions.
Thank you. So upcoming meeting and events with details posted on the Township website are as follows. This Friday, October 17th, 5 p.m. is the Halloween trunk or treat at Covered Bridge Park. Monday, October 20th, 7 p.m. is the Park and Recreation Board. Wednesday, October 22nd, 10 a.m. is the Pension Committee. Wednesday, October 22nd, 7 p.m. Zoning Hearing Board. Monday, October 27th, 6 p.m. Landscape and Shade Tree Commission. Monday, October 27th, 7 p.m. Environmental Advisory Council. Thursday, October 30th, 5 p.m. Board of Commissioners Budget Workshop. Friday, October 31st is Trick or Treat Night at 6 p.m. Monday, November 3rd, 7 p.m. is the Public Safety Commission. And Wednesday, November 5th, 7 p.m. is the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you, Tom. We have no direction and discussion. Agenda item 12 is courtesy of the floor. Again, opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on any non-agenda items. Is there anyone present this evening with a public comment for the board? Is there anyone online with a comment? There is not. Moving on to agenda item 13, I need a motion to authorize payment of invoices and disbursements.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have no executive session to schedule. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
It wasn't one of the shorter meetings.